Okay. Computers are running ways. Yeah, here. Thank you. City Council meeting for August 9, 2010, left in order. No new times indicated next to the agenda items on approximate start time only. Please turn off all cell phone pagers for the duration of the meeting. The city clerk, please call the roll. And I'm not. We are looking.
Mayor Scott.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Snyder.
Here.
Councilman Moreno. Councilman Benson.
Here.
Councilwoman Carson.
Here.
Councilwoman Teeter.
Here.
Councilman Johnson.
Here.
Councilman McIntyre.
Here.
Councilman Cole.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. And Councilperson Marino is excused. He's out of state, I believe, at a wedding or something. He had said something about it. Out of the country? Mexico. I heard that. Okay, will the audience please rise for a moment of silence and then join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, will staff please pass our microphone to the audience?
Pam Stratton. Debbie Thomas.
Danny Thomas. Bob Flower.
Janet Kesey. Derek Donna. Tobo Borga. Glenn Murray. Joy Bishop.
Gene Leffel.
Kathy Girardi. Barbara Biggs.
Dave Beer.
Jessica Maloney.
Mark Industry.
Arson Duke.
Donna Jansen.
Greg Clemens, Public Works. Paul Workman, Planning Department. Brian McBroom, Community Development.
Ms. Ryan Cordero, Intergovernmental Relations.
Bill Walker, Chief of Police.
Whitney Morris, Director of Economic Development. Annette Newman, Deputy City Manager.
Tom Aker, Deputy City Manager.
Ken Wade.
Sandy Needham.
Thank you. First, I need to apologize. I have an illness in the house, and time got away from me tonight, so I was not able to make an executive session at 5:30 today. So I'm going to need a motion to continue that executive session to the week after next. What date that would be, Mr. 23rd to the 23rd. Mr. McIntyre? So, Ms. Snyder?
Second motion.
Have a motion and a second to take executive session off of tonight and to move it to the 23rd
And time?
at 5:30. All those in favor? Yeah, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. And again, I apologize. I didn't expect I would lose track of the time, but it happens. Next item is citizen communication. Public comment available on the table of the entrance to council chambers for those who wish to address council on any matter other than an agenda item. When I call your name, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Reminded each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. The council is reminded they are not to engage in discussion or debate, but may ask clarifying questions and express concern when appropriate. City manager will generally assign staff members to get necessary information to solve issues. First person on the list is Glenn Murray. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Murray, 110 Hannah Street, Brighton. I'm here to address you about an issue that took place 2 weeks ago at a city council meeting. It had to do with electronic communications, texting, that kind of thing. And you might ask, why do I come, why do I talk to you about that? It's been handled. The truth of the matter is that I don't think it is. We passed either a resolution or a policy on that issue. And my understanding is a resolution of policy can be changed by this council very quickly. There's a lot more important things that need to be talked about that issue. Let me bring up a few things, I guess, and number one of which is disrespectful to the speakers in the audience when you have a speaker in front of you and you're ignoring them. It's arrogant for somebody to say that it's not going to happen. It's pompous that you think you're above the rest of us. Name calling and finger pointing by the council is nothing to help you out. Emergencies were brought up. It's interesting. Everybody in your family, I'm sure, knows where you're at on these nights. And what's even more interesting, talking about emergency, we have the chief of police sitting right here. So if there's an emergency, can you be reached? Yes, you can. That's not an issue. And a few years ago, you didn't even have that capability of having that cell phone next to you. Okay? So as far as emergencies in and of itself, there's ways to reach people. Personal business being conducted in a meeting is not appropriate. We, as the public, have elected you, have paid you to do the public's business, and during this time, we expect that to happen. This kind of behavior is embarrassing to the council and makes the citizens of Commerce City question the ethics and professionalism of the council. What should have been discussed that night? This is the issue. What should have been discussed is CRS 24-6-402. You know what that is? I have a copy of it. I will read it quickly. Open meeting requirement of the Sunshine, of the open minutes requirements of the Colorado Sunshine Law. Colorado Sunshine Law generally requires that any state or local governmental body that needs to discuss public business or to take formal action do so in a meeting open to the public. Under that law, meeting refers to any kind of gathering convened to discuss public business, whether in person, by telephone, electronically, or by other means of communications. Electronic emails can be considered meetings in the same statute. It means, well, the long and short, it means it's illegal to have a personal, private meeting in the presence, in other words, in secret of the other meeting.
Thank you, sir.
I'm a concerned citizen. Thank you.
Next person on the list, and sir, I have to apologize. It's my hand. I just can't read handwriting that well. Ken, I'm sorry, this is the last name, sir.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, I have a question with regard to Mr. Murray's comments.
Okay, sir.
I'd like to address this to Mr. Gaylor. Mr. Murray's brought up whether or not these communications will violate the Colorado Sunshine Law. How do you feel about that? I guess we have a policy now, but our policy can be changed by a majority vote of this council. We can't change state law, obviously. It seems to me like Mr. Murray has a point. I'd just like to get your opinion about this, sir.
Well, you have two things to consider here. One is, as you have stated, it's been decided by the council what the rule is for this council. Now, that rule is decided by the council is more restrictive than the state law, because the state law, the operative word in what Mr. Murray read there was the word discuss. So if a council member is emailing or texting to other members of the council, more than two others, getting a reply back, that's a violation. It's not a violation for one member, and I'm talking about a violation of the open meetings law. It's not a violation for one member of the council to talk to one other member of the council, in person, by text, or whatever. But I think we're a little bit beyond the point. I mean, I'm not sitting here describing to a practice of the council that would violate your own decision. Well, all I'm saying is that it's not a violation of the Sunshine Law if it's handled properly by one member of the council to one other member of the council. But rather than even go into the exceptions and so forth of that, let it be said it's a violation of your decision as to what is to be done. And that includes texting or emailing from one to another one, even though it may not be a violation of the Sunshine Law.
Or to anyone. Or in that 1 hour.
Yeah, or as long as there's not a response coming back, you can send it out. But it's not a discussion that's taking place if there are no responses coming back. But it's on the fence. It's a thin ice situation when you attempt to circumvent the Sunshine Law, whether it's in this meeting or some other meeting where you're having more than two council members present and you're engaging in a discussion of city council business.
It would be my understanding of our policy that there's not to be any communication, texting, emails, whatever, by any member of this council with anybody else, whether they're on the council or not. Is that your understanding of our policy?
I think that's what the motion said.
Right. So like you say, our policy is more restrictive than the Sunshine Law, but anytime somebody tries to communicate with two other people, then it's going to be a violation of the Sunshine Law.
Two other council members.
Right, you have any two council members, right? Any two other council members. All right, thank you. That clarifies that. I hope to everybody's satisfaction.
Ms. Carson?
I think my question was just answered. Thank you.
Okay. The only other question I have is there any difference between the texting from the phones, yes, and the notice back?
Same rule applies. We're communicating. We're talking about communicating here.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry. And it looks like Wig to me, but it is. Oh, okay. Well then, Mr. Wig, good evening.
It's a little, has two eyes, it kind of confuses everybody.
Okay.
That's probably the small part. My name is Ken Wade, and I live at 4047 King Street in Denver. And I'm here representing the Second Wind Fund. I'm on the board of directors of the Second Wind Fund in Metro Denver. The Second Wind Fund is a teen suicide prevention program that's been working in the Denver metro area for 8 years. And I want to tell you briefly, basically, about the issue a little bit of suicide among teens. And secondly, what are we doing about it? And as I always like to do, I'd like to say how we can help us. Colorado has the 6th highest suicide rate in the country. And among youth, suicide is the second leading cause of death. It's estimated that 1 in 4 of youth will have more than passing thoughts of suicide in any given year. second WIN fund is doing about it is we found that there were many kids, 8 years ago this started when there were 4 suicides at Greenmount High School. And the neighborhood there came together and decided they needed to do something. And what they asked the school said, what we need is help for kids who are either underinsured or uninsured. Can you provide some counseling? So they were able to, little church raised some monies, and that was the genesis of the second WIN fund. It has since expanded the program throughout the Denver metro region and actually onto other places in Colorado. Basic idea is to provide, is to remove the financial and try to remove the financial and societal barriers so that when somebody at a school identifies a kid in primary schools and they don't have access to services, they have a place to go. We provide a list of licensed, vetted, and insured counselors that these kids can meet with, and we basically pay for that. Up to now, we served over 1,800 kids in the Denver metro region. And I give a lot of numbers. The best number is that the best of our knowledge, we've had lots of kids at this point. And those kids, as mentioned, this is not just the kids in Lakewood. These are kids here in the high schools, here in our city, in the middle schools, and sadly to say, even here in the elementary schools. We're kind of running as a tag team here today, so that's my piece of it. The one thing I'd like to add is, if you take away nothing else, please remember that it's got to be okay for these kids to ask for help. There's a lot of stigma around the issue, and then to help us be there. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Flannery, before I call the next person, this may be something we want to maybe get a short report on, maybe after council to see how it affects us and those kind of things. I think it's a lot of Ms. Carson,
Mr. Wade, it escapes my memory right now, but I do know when I was employed as 12, there's a ribbon campaign. Do you know of this?
Yeah, Urban works in the schools. They're in Westminster International. They do a very good job in working in the schools for education about the issues. We are different. We do collaborative things. What we do primarily is we're there funding to make sure that those services are get. That's what our organization does.
Okay.
And again, we've been around. This will be actually our 9th year.
Okay. I was wondering if you guys were.
I know them well.
And it was my understanding at that time that one of the very awakening facts to that was that when these children commit suicide, when you interview the family and friends, most of them didn't even know these children were having issues. Is what my understanding was back then. Is that still?
That tends to be the case. There's always some signs, but truth be known, 8 years ago, I was 17 and five. And it is obviously devastating, but it's also, I could spend an hour telling you how talented she was, and how difficult it is to understand why she would do that, even with all of that. But you're absolutely right. So how do we, teens tend to opportunities. And so that's the message we want to get out there that's over in the schools. And we also work through other agencies, health, we have approaching them, the American Indian Family Services, and a number of other agencies.
My heart goes to you. I had a girlfriend who, and I know the other sometimes the kids are. I feel for you. Nothing I don't think a parent ever gets over. If there's anything that I can make assistance to, let me know.
Great. Yeah. Sandy's had a lot of ideas.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Flannery, and Mr. Gale, I guess, if we wanted to just look at the council to see if maybe we get a more detailed report than the 3 minutes that were on the citizens, do we need to just get it okay from the council? Or how do I want to do that? Because it seems like we have people who want to ask questions and maybe look for more information, and I'm sure the next speaker is going to give us some, but how would we go about scheduling a future time? Do we need to do it at the council's request? Or?
Yes, the council can just direct city manager to have it on the agenda for a report. That's the thing. The concern that council has to have is that on citizens' communications, you have the rule of 3 minutes. So when you deviate from that rule, where do you draw the line? Because the next person is going to request the same as you lose all.
See, that's what I was trying to get before I called up the next person.
Right.
Because then it winds up being you get 50 people all taking their 3 minutes to talk about the same topic.
I just suggest directing the city manager to have it on the agenda for a report.
And would that be okay with Councilman McElwain?
Just going to suggest that we invite them back for the community's office and by the appropriate time for the future meeting. We could have a bit more in-depth discussion.
Does anyone have a challenge with that on council? Mr. Fuller.
We're still going to give the lady that's about to speak, correct?
Well, is that what you were talking about, Mr. Campbell? Here's my problem. For me, it would be fine, but then I run into what happens to the ones that...
I think since she's here,
Okay.
it's not violating your strict policy if each person is limited to 30 minutes. But you get to a point, if you have a whole string of person, it's obviously circumventing the purpose of the rule. But one more person would not be out of line.
Okay. Again, it's not directed at you personally. It's trying to keep everything equal, let's say. Okay, the next person is Sandy May. Did I say that one correctly? Okay.
Ms. Bauer, would you set the time, please?
I will, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Sandy Maven. I live at 5251 West Isle Drive in Lakewood, Colorado. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for members for your support, for the time that you allow for citizens like him and myself to come and speak to you. First, our purpose here is twofold. We want to make sure, first of all, that all school professionals, teachers, guidance counselors, any staff that work with children know that these services are available, and they're available free of cost to the kid who needs them. So what I get to talk to you about is how we raise the money for that. Our annual fundraising event is on Sunday, September 19th. The very first event had 66 participants that raised $4,000. Last year we had 3,200 participants and raised $220,000 to be able to provide these services to the kids free of charge. After several years of being held in a Green Mountain neighborhood in Lakewood, we moved the event to the Jefferson County Fairgrounds at 6th and Indiana Street. Now, why should you travel that kind of distance to support this event? First, of course, because your kids need you to do this. But secondly, this is a very fun event. The event opens at 9 a.m., program begins at 11. There are then 5 events that begin just after noon, a timed 5K run, a family bike ride of either 2 miles or 4 miles, and a 5K walk or a 1 mile walk that is designed for people like me who make our grandchildren come and do this walk with us every year. We have t-shirts for everyone, lots of music and dance, a lot of kids' activities, which is actually why they don't object to coming with me. We have free massages, a wonderful picnic, hot dogs, hamburger sandwiches, homemade cookies. We had 3,000 tacos last time. The registration fee is $30 for adults and $15 for students and seniors, and the fee can be waived if a certain level of pledges is collected. We also have several levels of both individual and team prizes for the most pledges collected, as described in our brochure, which your city clerk was kind enough to let me hand out while you were just discussing. One of the team prizes, or one of the individual prizes, is a trip to Hawaii. There's also a memorial dove release that is a quite moving part of the program by and for those who have lost a loved one to suicide. So last thing I want to say is there are 3 ways to get more information. One is our phone number, 303-763-1775. The website is www.swfmd, which stands for Second Wind Fund MetroDenver.org. And the brochures that you have, and I'll leave a few extras with your city clerk. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next person is Joy Bishop. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Joy Bishop. I live at 6491 Glencoe Street. For the last few months, I've been attending the liquor board meetings here in this same room, the first Tuesday of each month. I've watched as young business owners came up here to the podium and answered the charges of serving a minor. I've watched as the liquor board set their penalties and their fines. And I've watched as they turned away from the podium with a gloating look on their face and a great big smile and walked back to the people they were here with and gloated how easily they got off. I finally asked Karen Stevens at the last meeting who sets the fines and penalties for the liquor board, and she told me that it was you folks. So I'm here tonight to ask you to take another look at those fines and penalties. These businesses that are serving our teenagers who are not old enough to drink need something more than a tap on the pinky. They need something to hit them in the pocketbook and make an impression that they don't need to be serving minors. They shouldn't be walking out of here gloating how easy they got off. They shouldn't be bragging to their friends about how the liquor board has no power and how the liquor board let them off easy. I think we need to take another look at this, and I think we need to hit them where it hurts, and that's in their pocketbooks. Thank you. I really would like to see this come up in our council meeting soon.
Okay. Senator?
Yes, Joy, thank you for coming. City Attorney Taylor, having been on the Stuart Plaza Liquor Board for many years, there is a process in place where the fines that are given out and the various penalties that can be given are based on the amount of offenses, how many times they've been in front of us, what are the, different, there's several criteria that are given for that. And I've actually had people that have been given the fines, one bar in particular, come to me crying afterwards saying that they actually didn't think they could survive the 2 weeks that they were given, that they were going to have to be unable to sell alcohol, and they were worried they were going to be shut down. So I know that, as things progress and things get worse, the stiffs and the penalties do become, higher and much harder to take. So if you could maybe just give like a really quick synopsis of how the liquor authority comes to their conclusions, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Well, the fines and penalties I've seen in the last few months have been 2 days, 3 days. That's not enough.
The liquor authority has a set of guidelines. The guidelines have parameters that are set by the city council as far as the maximum penalty or recommended minimum penalty. Within the realm of those guidelines, then the liquor board acts based upon, they take into consideration the number of prior offenses and the proximity in time of the most recent offense. If it's more than 3 years, for example, it's not given as much weight as if it were last week for a prior offense. So the liquor board does have considerable discretion, and they will usually listen to any mitigating circumstances or any aggravating circumstances and then render a decision. I personally don't attend the liquor board hearings anymore. Karen Stevens from my office is responsible for the legal advice of those proceedings. But they do have the guidelines that they use, and beyond that, I can't address any specific case because I'm not familiar with any specific case, but I can say there are cases where the penalty may appear to be insufficient, but on the other hand, there are cases where the penalty may seem to be too strong. But that's on a case-by-case basis, and I know that in talking to Joy that she does attend those liquor board meetings, but I will certainly mention to Karen, who will take it to the board, that there was a discussion at the city council about this issue.
Well, I would certainly appreciate that, and I mean, I certainly don't want to see, any minor going any sort of drink anywhere in the city. Certainly that poses a danger for themselves and others, and so I'm all for seeing establishments have to be responsible for that. And I know several of them have stepped up, bought new equipment. There's new things that people can run their IDs right away as soon as they walk in the door. I mean, I've seen some of these establishments really step up and try to be more proactive. And so, if that's something the council thinks that they need to take a look at, if that's what the council decides to do, I'd be more than happy to review that. But I have not. I was the lead council member for a long time, and that's when Steve Attorney was still presiding over that. And as of late, the second, just within this last year, Councilwoman Teeter has taken over the lead on the liquor authority, so she may be able to speak more on the more current issues. But I would certainly leave that to council if they felt like it needed to be reviewed. And Laura, if you could do something with the lines, that'd be great.
I was waiting for a moment. I didn't want to drop them and make noise while you were
Thank you. She's going to drop them now. Thanks.
Actually, I'm trying to
Mr. Mayor, I would like to add a favorable comment to the council's information. Periodically, and the chief can probably address this in more detail than I, but because I'm not sure if they have set times or if it's just at random more or less, but they have sting operations throughout the city where they have a minor go in to an establishment, attempt to buy liquor, and I can say that, and looking at the statistics, that the statistics on illegal purchases have greatly improved in that the percentage of violators has considerably decreased in the last few years over what they used to be.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, as I recall, I was an alternate on the liquor board back in the early part of 07 when some of these new regulations were adopted. Is that what we're dealing with here? Those that we adopted? And it seems like we did say that if it was somebody's first time, it was going to be fairly easy. But they kept violating, and the penalties were going to get tougher and tougher. You recall, Snyder, what the situation was in that case where the person did like a 2-week suspension.
Yeah.
How many times did they?
It was like the first time, and then they were within, I think they were right on the cusp of 3 years. I'm sorry, I think that they were right on the cusp, if I remember correctly, of 3 years, because if they've not had a violation in 3 years, it changes the penalty, but if they've had one violation within the 3 years, then it's a stiffer penalty. So if I remember correctly, the case that you're referring to, they were like within a couple of days of that 3 years. And so they had a 2 week, they were going to be shut down for 2 weeks, and I believe that we worked on that a little bit. So.
That was a uniform penalty.
Right.
That sort of violation.
Right.
And for the third violation in 3 years, they lose their license completely.
Right. I mean, the penalties can be very stiff. And if it's a restaurant, like let's just say as an example, it's a restaurant that's in town, and they serve, they really do a lot of food service, but they also have, liquor license. they can still be shut down and unable to serve liquor for a, say, 2-week period of time, but then they can still serve food, if it's a restaurant. Whereas if it's a liquor store itself, then the liquor store is obviously just shut down completely for being able to sell alcohol. So it just depends on what they hold. If they hold, if they're a restaurant that holds a liquor license, if they're a cabaret, it really becomes involved in what specifically the establishment holds. Does that help answer your question, Mr. Wilson?
Yes. It just seems to me that if somebody's paying attention, this is not that hard a law to comply with, just to check people's ID. I don't understand if they have 2 violations in a 3-year period, 2 weeks sounds pretty reasonable to me. Third, within a 3-year period, you lose your liquor license, and that's it. And I think we do enough of these things that these people know that the city does these things, so they should be on the alert for all these things and not let it happen again. But how hard is it just to say, I've got to see your ID card? Now, somebody's got a false ID card, and they look like they're 21. I don't know. How is that treated? Chief, you might be able to answer that.
Mr. McIntyre, I mean, it should say this accurate.
I think Ms. Bishop raises a really fantastic observation. I think rather than do a service discussion, we see a concern here. I think she raises some immediate feedback that we would have no one sitting at the dais would have a meeting, a board meeting, rather than engaging in an ad hoc discussion about liquor penalties and process. If council is amenable, I would suggest that we ask Mr. Gaylor to have a Stevens look at a report on the statistics related to the change in law over the last several years. So we always have it off the estimate on the improvements and potentially look at what our penalty structures are versus our peer governments. And then we can have a more in-depth discussion and determine whether action is to be taken for those consideration of communication.
Excellent.
Can I get a response from the chief to my question? He's already understanding that.
Sure, be happy to give you a response. Essentially, under the law, it's an affirmative defense. If you're a liquor licensee, if you check somebody's ID, it appears modified and genuine, turns out to be false. You're protected. So
And they don't appear to be 12 years old. I mean, it's that hard.
yes.
As far as they're 21 and they have a false ID, that's a good thing. Then that's an affirmative. So that's good. I think that's the way it ought to be. Because people are checking, and I would hope that it's a criminal offense for somebody to prevent a false ID. I think it is. Thank you. I would agree with Mr. McElhenney's.
Okay.
I would agree with Mr. McElhenney's comments that we need to have a further discussion on this. But
Mr. McIntyre, would you be able to set that up for a future meeting? I appreciate it. Anybody from council have a challenge with that? Seeing none, that's how we'll handle it. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. The first set of minutes is the meeting of July 12, 2010. But before voting on the minutes, I need a motion to allow Councilman Peter and Councilman Johnson to abstain from voting because of excused absences. Ms. Snyder.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I move to allow Councilwoman Peter and Councilman Johnson to obtain from the minutes of July 12, 2010.
Mr. Mayor. Second to allow Councilwoman Peter and Councilman Johnson to abstain. Is there any discussion? Mr. Benson, do you have discussion?
not on that issue now. I've got an issue with the content of these minutes. So if you just say that.
I can always vote at this, and what we are voting on is just to, well, if it's discussion on these minutes, then it needs to be now. Go ahead, sir.
All right, on page 7, it states that I expressed concern about the condition of landscaping on the median along Chambers Road between 113 and 110. I believe that I said, or at least to be accurate, that would be between 117 and 120. Is that correct, Mr. Aker? 117 and 120. Is Tom still here? Okay. I think that's, it should be between 117 and 120, not 110 and 113.
Mr. Benson?
Yes.
I
would be happy to review the audio once again, but I generally take them right off the audios, but I'd be happy to review the audio once more.
To be accurate, it should be 117 to 120. So that's what we discussed right now.
We can just correct that, Administrator.
And all was there at that meeting.
Well, you know, and that was a question I had. The only thing was, is that Councilwoman Teeter left before the meeting was over, so that's why it suggested that she be excused from voting, because there would be a problem with approve part of the minutes and not approve the other part, so we just said, excuse for all the minutes.
Okay, now I entertain a motion to approve the minutes for July 12th. Ms. Snyder
Yes, move to approve the regular meeting minutes, July 12, 2010.
and Mr. McIntyre. We didn't abstain yet? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I have a motion and a second to allow Councilwoman Teeter and Council Johnson to abstain from voting in the minutes of July 12th. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Now I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of Ms. Snyder.
I'm going to repeat myself. Move approval of regular meeting minutes, July 12, 2010. Council is seated.
And Mr. McIntyre. Second. A motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 12th, 2010. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Second set of minutes before council this evening is approval for the minutes of the meeting of July 19, 2010. Now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of that date. Ms. Snyder.
Move to approve regular meeting minutes, July 19, 2010. Council is seated.
Mr. McEldowney. Second. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 19, 2010. Any discussion? Seeing none. Request a voice vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is consent agenda. There's 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. Council be reminded that these items will be removed from the consent agenda for special purposes at the request of the council members. Anyone wishing to remove either item or any of the items from the consent agenda, Mr. McIntyre is okay. I'm open to a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. McIntyre. So moved. Ms. Peter.
Second motion?
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Will city attorney please read the titles?
Title of Ordinance 1827 reads, an ordinance adopting the C3 Vision Transportation Plan. Title of Ordinance 1829 reads, an ordinance amending the 2010 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Division of Emergency Management Grant in the amount up to $17,200 for the following items: generator upgrade, audio visuals, satellite TV upgrade, AV upgrade, and purchase of a portable generator and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Title of Ordinance 1830, an ordinance amending the 2010 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Tri-County Health Department pass-through grant from Colorado Department of Health and Environment, CDPHE, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, in the amount of $7,480 for the purchase of Motorola radios, plus accessories and air purifying respirator kits, plus accessories for use by the Emergency Management Division, and authorization of the expenditure thereof. That completes the consent agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second. City attorney please read the titles. Request a roll call vote, please. Vote is 8 yeses. Consent agenda is passed. Thank you very much. There's going to be 3 public hearings scheduled for this evening. 2 will be heard as one item and voted on separately. I'd like to start by opening the public hearing on CU-37-93-10. Will City Manager Jerry Connery, moved by staff up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Mr. Paul Workman, former community development officer, going to be addressing this. And if you look at the items, we combining B and C together as one report, so we'll have item A and then B and C.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. The first case before you this evening is case CU-37-93-10 for property located at 6450 York Street. The applicant is the Metro Wastewater Reclamation District. The request this evening is to revise a previously approved conditional use permit for a wastewater treatment facility. Subject property is located directly east of York Street, kind of southwest of I-270. It's currently zoned I-3. It's surrounded by other property that's zoned I-3 and unincorporated Adams County property. The comp plan calls it out for industrial. This is an aerial of the subject property. Again, York Street, directly to the west of the property. This is currently how the site functions and looks. What brings us here this evening is back in 1993, they were originally approved for a conditional use permit. As part of that approval, the following language was included. The failure to adhere to the approved development plan at that time would constitute basis for revocation of the conditional use permit after a public hearing, that it be expressly determined by that city council that the conditional use in that case would not be proper in the absence of compliance with that approved development plan. Statistically, by the numbers, roughly they serve 750 square miles of the Denver metro area. It includes about 1.7 million people, 59 local governments, 2 corporate connectors. They roughly treat about 150 million gallons a day. Continuing with the statistics, they're the largest treatment facility in the Rocky Mountain West. They have about 350 employees. And they do operate 24/7, 365. Very quickly, they get their influence on their wastewater from a variety of sources, commercial, residential, industrial. They go through a primary clarifying process through these barge drain spirit basins, primary clarifiers, in order to remove solids from liquids. Then they go through sort of a secondary clarifying process to remove any smaller remaining solids from liquids. Then they go through a chlorination, dechlorination process, and then ultimately return to the South Platte River. So this was the site plan that was approved back in 1993 by council at that time. Any changes to this site plan would be cause for revocation through public hearing. Metro Wastewater is attempting to meet some new ammonia standards from the state. In order to do that, they have to make some changes to their site, and in order to continue to meet their demand, they need to make some changes to this. So this was what was approved in 1993. This is the current site plan as submitted by the applicant. Virtually identical to what was approved back in 1993. Initially in 2010, there's 2 projects underway. The first, as mentioned, is the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment implemented some new ammonia standards on the applicant. They will be required to meet those standards by January 1 of 2015. In order to meet that deadline, they need to begin construction this fall and this spring, continue to do that until 2015. Secondarily, they are working on a secondary access on the southernmost portion of the site, a bridge that will allow for some relief for construction traffic and things of that nature as they do these improvements. Long term, they have 7 different phases of improvement that extend beyond the year 2030. Those changes to the site have been highlighted in the different colors here. Essentially, there are 5 to 10 year periods for different improvements to the site. What is identified in white is currently existing and will continue to be at the site. And then, as mentioned, everything that's in color will be what is new or changed or added to the site in order to help meet these standards and implement their service long term. In the analysis for this application, there's kind of a 3-pronged approach. The first is from a regulatory standpoint. The proposed changes to the site are required in order to meet the new mandates from the state and maintain the current level of service. The changes to that development plan do require city approval, and they did provide copies of all of their permits from all their regulating agencies, and they are current on all of them. The
The second sort of prong for review of the application is looking at it in its context. Where is it given the surrounding land uses? The surrounding land uses are Suncor to the east, unincorporated Adams County to the north, Cherokee Power Plant to the west, and the Denver Water Recycling facility just to the south. So it's surrounded by other utility heavy industrial uses. The changes that are being proposed meet the items identified in the Seasonal Development Code and the building requirements. Tri-County Health did note that they are regulated both at the federal and state level, will continue to be regulated that way. Metro Wastewater is also voluntarily taking some odor control mitigation steps, and they were pleased to see that. The sort of third and final approach is what do these changes really mean? Ultimately, it's a state requirement that will improve the water quality that goes back into the South Platte River, which in turn would benefit the health, safety, and welfare of the community as a whole. With that, on July 6th, Planning Commission voted 5-0, sent a favorable recommendation to City Council with one recommended condition. That condition be that the applicant is required to stay current with their required permits. That will conclude staff's presentation at this time. Staff is available to answer any questions City Council may have.
Yes, you stated that they're taking steps to control the odor. I know that's something that I hear about from a lot of people, and it's too bad it's right on our border. But what steps are they taking?
At this time, they have relayed to staff that I believe it was in 2007 they adopted an odor control plan. Two immediate steps are the elimination of the composting that was at the facility in the southern end, which will be transitioned to additional clarifiers and items like that for the process. The other immediate item is to implement some odor control measures for some connections that occur from wastewater that comes from further along the metro area, so the western side of the metro area, the southern side of the metro area, that obviously takes a little longer to get to the site.
Has there been any measurable decrease in the odor? How do you measure that? How do you
Yeah, there was not an indication in terms of any statistics or percentages or particles, per square footer that was provided to staff. However, the applicant may have some of those sorts of details.
You know, I hear, and I think this is the wastewater treatment plant that people are talking about. The ponds that they have contain a lot of surfactants. And apparently about 1,000 ducks a year drown over there because they can't float anymore. They get in there and all their flotation ability is destroyed by the surfactants. Do you know anything about that?
No, sir, staff is unaware of that.
All right. I mean, they say that they'll just drown because they can't float anymore. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Where does the wastewater come from? Is it Denver? Where is it exactly?
The wastewater comes from a variety of sources. The Metro Wastewater does serve most of the Denver metro area. They get it from 59 local governments, 2 corporate connectors. The graphic on the slide essentially outlines the entire service area of the district.
Okay, that's what I thought. I have had so many complaints on odor from this facility, and if I had been on council in 1993, I would have absolutely voted not to have this be built in our city. However, if it's going to improve the odor and all, this would be a good thing since it already exists here. But as I said for years, I'm tired of Commerce City being a dumping ground for all the other cities. And I'll always stand by that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to address council on this? Evening, sir.
Yeah, sir. 14122. East 107th. I agree with Mr. Speaker. The situation is that they're always planning 10, 20,
30 years. And Denver keeps dumping on Adams County or Commerce City, depending on what they favor. The community, also elementary in those areas, they receive the brunt of this. And it's quite interesting that they're doing this now that they're talking about bringing, and there's possibility of Interstate 70 along 270. How much more can this community take? We've already crossed Brighton Boulevard into that area. You've got the service of RTD passing right by there. The only possibility of a station in Commerce City, but yet they're planning other RTD fast tracks somewhere else. The airport, Parker, but they can't finish ours before any of that. Our community needs some assistance. And somebody's got to sit down and tell Denver, hey, you got to plan better. It's not these people's fault that their property value will probably go down considerably. And they always say the stench is going to go away, but it doesn't. It's always there. It's in their clothes, when they sleep, when they wake up. It's not just a matter of saying yes. It's a matter of going back and see if they can plan a little bit better. It should be a planning of at least 100 years, not every 30 years. In 30 years, new city council up here standing, they'll be making the same decision. And at that point, they're going to want to bring it closer to Commerce City. They can sell water from everywhere to all the other areas around here, but they can't find a place to put this stuff at, or it's away from us. Even our old planners of cities, with the stench of the cattle, knew better. Those are the things that we have to look. It's better planning with you people up here so that you can represent us well. I don't think that they're giving you the right figures as far as what's going to go through there. In 30 years, that thing's going to be outdated and they're going to grow up again. They're going to want to grow more and more and more. So that's just my point of view from the community. Thank you.
Mr. Vince? Yes, Mr. Workman. What will be the result if this council doesn't approve this conditional use permit?
Well, maybe I'll let Mr. Bailey.
Here's the situation that the council is confronted with in a case of this nature. First of all, I just make sure that I was correct in that the size of the land area that is the subject of this application is not being increased. So we're talking about a conditional use that's taking place within the confines of a conditional use that was previously granted. One thing that the law is clear on is that one governmental entity cannot prevent another governmental entity from performing the services or duties that's imposed by statute. And that comes with the zoning law. There are some restrictions on what a city can do with building permits, but not with zoning. So I would have serious reservations when the size of the site is not being increased for the conditional use, and that the request that's being made is being made in order to satisfy some regulations by state and federal. And there's an effort here on behalf of the waste treatment facility to comply with those regulations. Does the city of Commerce City have authority to deny the operation of a facility that's in existence that's attempting to comply with federal and state regulations? I doubt that the court would uphold the city's authority to do that. However, in this case, there is an effort here by the wastewater facility to comply with the provisions of the Commerce City Land Use Code to bring this into compliance with our code. Now, I would not like to see the city get into a litigation over whether or not we have authority to control what the wastewater facility can do in this situation, because I don't think we prevail. But having said that, I think you should decide this case based upon the merits of the application. The evidence that I heard is the application is such that it's attempting to improve the odor control and improve some other requirements, and there's no evidence here that there is going to be an increase in an odor problem if this were granted. That could raise some questions that would be beneficial to the city in denying it if there were evidence that this would increase the odor issue. But we have an issue with the odor now. The conditional use was granted, and there's no evidence that they're not complying with the conditional use that was granted, and that would be your grounds for denying any other future application with regard to the existing conditional use permit.
And so your opinion is that if this whole council voted no, then they could challenge it and they would win in court?
Yes, under these circumstances.
All right. Thank you.
Just to call council's attention to the executive summary that was provided in our packets. It's a short 20-page summary of details so far, every question was raised. Does a great job of helping to qualify what the anticipated changes are, enhancements are adopted, including some visual representations, and help to convey some of the operating and other issues that were raised. So just to make sure that those are elements of that.
And I hope that I didn't miss it in there. Do we have a liaison from our city that is with the Metro Wastewater Treatment Plant? Did you say something?
Well, I was just going to offer that Mr. Lord and I sit on a body that is Metro Wastewater Department. The Adams Water Quality Association is a joint body between Brighton, South Adams County Water, and Wastewater in Commerce City, and that's specifically for the purpose of wastewater treatment. So we work very closely with them in that regard.
Okay. And I don't want to sound here, but just planting the trees and tall evergreens and such around an area like this, is this not helping immensely with that odor problem, especially would it not trap it in and keep it from, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for.
Sure.
I know that there is an effect that they can absorb. I don't know how many trees it would take to absorb an odor to that degree. I don't even know.
Sure. Perhaps maybe the best way the staff can answer that is that currently there is a significant number of trees along the York side of the property for a variety of reasons. Odor, visual appeal, right, there's the water that's right there. There's sort of a two-part answer to that question. One is that given the massive amounts of underground pipe work that's there and infrastructure and utilities and things of that nature, sometimes landscaping can become difficult in those different scenarios. The other is that odor is different than the visual clutter or aesthetic image. And depending on the wind patterns or the storm rolls in an afternoon, There may be times when that may work, there may be times when that may not work.
Okay, thank you.
There's an odor hotline that has been in effect for many years, and when I was on council before, the incidence of odor used to be a lot more prevalent, and it wasn't only from wastewater, it was from Suncor when they would have the sulfur burn off, and it was also from agricultural facilities over here. So a lot of the odors that you smelled out there, when you called the odor hotline, they could tell you which way the wind was blowing, where it was coming from, and everything. I don't think it is right to place all the blame in one spot because it isn't all their odor. There's, whether you know it or not, there's a rendering plant that is south of there that is providing most of the odor. It isn't coming from Metro Wastewater. And so I think that as a council, before we jump off the bridge on one thing, we should absolutely figure out where if it's coming from there and know where we're going to lay the blame. And odor hotline, if you want to call it off, Tri-County Health runs it, and you can find out at any given time if you have an odor that you don't know what it is, or it's suspicious of it, if it's gas or if it's sulfur, or if it's something you've never smelled before, they can basically tell you where it's coming from.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the
Thank you, Mr.
I pushed a little button right there to your left.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Barbara Biggs, and I'm the Governmental Affairs Officer with Metro Wastewater. With me tonight is Catherine Raleigh, our District Manager, Dave Peer, our Comprehensive Planning Officer, and Jessica Maloney, our Comprehensive Planner. Mr. Peer and Ms. Maloney were primarily responsible for putting together the application that's been reviewed by the city. I just wanted to come up and provide a little bit of clarification on some of the issues that the council's been describing. Mr. Vogt, thank you very much, Councilman Vogt, for your comments. The Metro District has actually been an active participant in the Northeast Metropolitan Industrial Partnership to address odor issues from all of the sources in that portion of Adams County and Commerce City for many, many years. We're actually a founding member of that Northeast Metropolitan Industrial Council. The Robert W. Height Treatment Facility has actually been in its current location at 6450 York since 1964. The plant began operation in 1966, providing full secondary wastewater treatment 6 years before the Clean Water Act required entities to move to full secondary treatment. Right now, the Metro District has a $1.1 billion improvement plan, capital improvement plan in place for the Robert W. Height Treatment Facility to address not only the ammonia issues that are the subject of the current construction, but also nutrient criteria and other concerns and other regulatory requirements that we anticipate. As far as our odor control efforts, we have already completed one. We have identified, as Mr. Workman said, in 2007, we completed a study that looked at all sources of odor on or near the Robert W. Height Treatment Facility, and we have already completed odor and prioritized those sources of odor and identified technologies to deal with those odors. We have already installed odor control at our Fort North Washington lift station, which is basically at the confluence of Clear Creek, basically York and Highway 224. We are in design of odor control facilities at our Clear Creek siphon, which is just directly across York Street. So as you drive south on York Street, it's that siphon structure that brings wastewater that's all the way to the old area under the South Platte River into the plant. Those odor control facilities are under design, and we did demolish and cease composting on the site, which was another source of odors in June of 2009. One other issue I'd like to point out that effective June of 2009, another thing that was effective
in June of 2009 is the South Adams County Water and Sanitation District, which provides wastewater treatment in the city of Commerce City, became a member of the Metro District. So in the past, when the district was formed in the 60s and the plant was constructed in the early 60s, we did not provide any service to the Commerce City area. Now, South Adams County Water and Sanitation District is a member of the Metro District in exactly the same manner as the city of Denver, the city of Aurora, the city of Fordham, the city of Lakewood. We are not part of the city of Denver. We are a separate governmental entity that provides wastewater treatment services to the entire metropolitan region. Another major project that we currently have in the planning stages is a northern treatment plant. There seems to be a lot of confusion about future expansions of the Robert W. Height treatment facility. If you look at the aerial pictures, you can see that the Height facility is pretty much landlocked. There is enough room on that Height facility to meet the growth requirements, capacity requirements of the metro area, and to meet future regulatory requirements. So the district is in the approval process for a wastewater utility plan for a second satellite treatment facility, our northern treatment plant, that will be located in the very southern edge of Weld County, that will provide wastewater service to the northern portion of Commerce City that are currently pumped back to the South Adams County Water and Sanitation District plant at McKay and the South Platte River. So there are a number of efforts underway to ensure that the South Platte River is protected now and well into the future, and to ensure that this facility and our northern facility are good neighbors and that we do address river control. The last issue I would like to discuss is the issue that Councilman Benson raised with regards to the ducks. During the incredibly difficult winter of 2008 to 2009, when the Metro District had one of the coldest winters on record, and virtually every standing body of water in the greater metropolitan region was frozen over for reasons that no one's been able to identify. A certain species of duck, northern shovelers, did not migrate south that winter. They got trapped in the metropolitan region with no open water, save for the open water wastewater treatment plants. The Metro District was not the only wastewater treatment plant that had issues with ducks that winter. While the press has pointed the finger at surfactants in wastewater, it was a very difficult winter. The ducks were very malnourished, and the USGS and the Fish and Wildlife Service conducted extensive studies that were not able to identify any definitive cause of the duck death. There were about 800 ducks that died on the Height facility plant site, but we also engaged in a very aggressive program of identifying sick ducks, capturing them, getting them to duck refuge or duck rehab facility, wildlife rehab facilities, and we have not had a repeat of that incident since then. So it seems in many ways to have been a combination of a species of birds that didn't migrate when they should have, and a very difficult winter during the winter of 2008 and 2009. And with that, I would be happy to answer, or try to answer any questions.
Any questions from council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address council? Seeing none? Close the public hearing. Entertain a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the planning commission for CUP-37-93-10. Mr. McElhenney? So moved. Mr. Johnson? Second. Moved and seconded to accept the findings and recommendations of the planning commission for CUP-37-93-10. Discussion? Seeing none? Question for voice vote. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Thank you. Do you need to travel? Okay. Okay, the next public hearing is, I'm sorry.
Now you need to approve the condition.
Approve the condition. Approve CU-37-93-10. Ms. Snyder.
Yes, move approval, CU-37-93-10.
McElhenney. Second. Moved and seconded to approve CU-37-93-10. 2017-3-10 concerning discussion? Seeing none, will the secretary read that title?
Title is conditional use permit, conditional use granted for the city of Commerce City to Metro Wastewater Reclamation District, case number CU-37-93-10.
Motion and a second. Secretary read the title. Press the roll call.
Okay, the next public hearing is CU 9210 and Resolution 2010-42 approving S 569-10. They will be heard as one item but voted on separately. I'd like to open the public hearing, and will City Manager Jerry Flannery please invite the staff up to review the case. Thank you again, sir. Carry on.
Thank you once again, members of the City Council and City Manager Flannery. As mentioned beforehand, there are two individual cases, but there will be one presentation. But there will be two separate motions. The first case this evening is case CU-92-10. And the second is S-569-10. The applicant in this set of cases is the Denver Water. They are located at 5650 York Street, actually directly south of the Metro Wastewater Facility. And the request this evening are for a conditional use permit for an existing water treatment facility, and the second is to consolidate 3 existing lots into one new lot. Subject property as well is located directly east of York Street. The O'Brien Canal to the north, and then this little sliver just on the other side of the water there is the Metro Wastewater Facility, Suncor, located to the east. Site's currently zoned public, surrounded by property zoned I-3, maybe development directly to the south, and some unincorporated Adams County properties to the west. This is an aerial of the subject property. Again, York Street located to the west, with the canal to the north, and then again the Metro site directly across the river there. This is currently how the site looks and functions. Very briefly, the case history regarding this site is in 2001, the property was rezoned from a combination of agriculture and I-3 to its current public zoning designation. There were 3 conditions on that case, which are highlighted on the slide. The applicant has met all of those conditions, as well as a sister application at that time in 2001 for a use by permit for a water treatment facility, and the conditions on that case were identical to those in the rezoning case. This is the property, York Street, located at the bottom of the photo here. This is the entrance into the Denver Water Facility. Very attractive, very well landscaped. This is a photo looking north. Again, York Street in sort of the center of the photo, with some of the buildings, landscaping, and fencing along York Street. This is the fencing that was required as part of the previous conditions in the landscaping, and then the background of the actual buildings for the Denver Water Plant. So the photo was submitted by the applicant on top one of the buildings, actually looking to the northwest, Cherokee Power Plant, York Street, is for the middle of the photo here. Some plant highlights: they operate 24/7, 365 days a year as well. Their maximum capacity is actually 30 million gallons a day, and they provide recycled water for non-potable uses. The majority of their inflow actually comes from the Metro Wastewater site. After it goes through the Metro Wastewater process, a portion of that is delivered to Denver Water, the site directly to the south. They take it through their process, and then they send it out for non-potable uses, which is essentially the flow chart that's located here. The process begins through a biological process, and then it goes through a chlorination, dechlorination, a process to remove any solids, phosphorus, materials such as that nature. Then they actually have an 11 million gallon storage basin on the site. That's where they store their recycled water, and they pump it from there to the end users, which include facilities like the Denver Zoo, LaSalle, a variety of golf courses, public parks, things of that nature. This is the consolidation plat that's been submitted by the applicant. Again, York Street would be located out to the left-hand side of the plat here. Currently, there's 3 different lots. This would consolidate them into one with this remaining tract as a detention pond for their site. This is a site plan that was approved back in 2001. The north would be to the left-hand side of the screen here. The storage basin located in the center with their administration building and most of their process equipment on the northwest corner of the site. This is a photo of the site plan that's been submitted as part of the current application. Again, York Street off to the left-hand side of the facility, the storage basin in the center, the administration building sort of in the center of the site with a lot of the process buildings and structures, things of that nature in the northwest corner of the facility. The items that have been highlighted in gray here are items that are identified as part of their 5 to 10 year plan for increasing capacity. So there's some materials highlighted in gray. The majority of the items on the left-hand side of the site plan would all be interior to existing structures. And then on the right-hand side would be new structures in the drawing bed. So as mentioned, they do have a 10-year plan based on customer demand and their financial resources to implement a 3rd train treatment, which would increase their capacity to 45 million gallons a day. In addition, they'd be added some small storage buildings, maintenance buildings, things of that nature, mostly on the eastern portion of the site, as well as adding a 5th drying bed. In analyzing this application, there was determination from the development review team that they would be required to have conditional use permit approval. The Land Development Code now requires, whether it's wastewater or water treatment facilities, to have a conditional use permit. In order for staff to review any of these necessary future building permits, administratively they need this conditional use permit, so they proactively submitted their application and are here before council. As mentioned, the Denver Water is and has been compliant with all the previous case conditions from 2001. Much like the Metro wastewater facility, this Denver Water facility is compatible with the surrounding land uses, given the industrial nature of the area and the Metro facility to the north. With that, Planning Commission on July 6th voted 5-0 to forward a recommendation of approval for the conditional use permit subject to one condition. That condition being that new structures that are 5,000 square feet and not currently on their plans can be reviewed administratively, and the new structures over 5,000 square feet and not on their plans would require an amendment to the conditional use permit. On July 6th, Planning Commission also voted 5-0 to forward a recommendation of approval to City Council for the consolidation plan. That would conclude staff's presentation at this time, and staff is available to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to testify on this item? Is there anyone on council that had anything? Not subject to the box. So just raise your hand if you have anything. No? Okay. Well, then I will now close the public hearing and entertain a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission for CU 92-10. Please raise your hand if you'd like to make a motion. Councilman McEldowney.
So moved.
Councilman Johnson. Okay. We move and second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission for CU 92-10. Any other discussion? Seeing none, may I have a voice vote, please? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against? Motion passes. I will now entertain a motion to approve CU 92-10. Please raise your hand. Councilman Bullock.
Move approval of CU 92-10, Council Stevens.
Councilman McEldowney.
Second.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded to approve CU 92-10. Will the city attorney please read the title?
Title reads Conditional Use Permit, Conditional Use Granted by the City of Commerce City to Denver Water, case number CU-92-10.
Thank you, sir. May I have a roll call vote, please? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much. We will now be moving on to Resolution 2010-42, approving 569-10, I'll be turning it over back to Mayor Natal.
Okay, we're now on resolution 2010-42.
No, that's 569.
Approving S5. You hear?
We're at S569.
569. We finish that one? Do you want to take this, finish the motions first?
Probably would be preferable anyway, Mr. Mayor, since you did hear the public hearing portion, so. So now we need a motion to approve findings and recommendations of the planning commission.
For S569-10, is that correct? Okay, yes, I will now entertain a motion to accept findings and recommendations of the planning commission for S569-10. Councilman McEldowney? Councilman Johnson?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to accept the findings and recommendations of the planning commission on S569-10. Is there any discussion? Please raise your hand if you have any. Okay. Seeing none, may I have a voice vote, please? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I will now entertain a motion to approve S569-10. Councilman Johnson? Councilman McEldowney?
Second.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded to approve resolution S569-10. If there's no discussion, will the city attorney please read the title?
Title reads Resolution Approving Subdivision Plat in case S 569-10, resolution number 2010-42.
Thank you. And will the voice vote do on this one, please? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. I will now turn it over to Mayor Natal.
There's two resolutions that were not included on the consent agenda because they require separate voice votes. First is resolution 2010-40, resolution in support of Denver Regional Council of Governments comprehensive joint application to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program. Now ask City Manager Jimmy Flannery and Mr. Stanton for discussion of resolution 2010-40.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'd like to bring up Tom Ecker to introduce this item as well as Mr. Simon Montague.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I've asked Simon Montague with Dr. Cobb to come and provide some additional information and to go over this. He is more well versed at this than I am, and he will be able to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Members of council, good evening. Thank you once again for allowing me to speak in front of you. This resolution is in support of a joint application that Dr. Cog is submitting on behalf of a coalition of various people from around the metro region for the Department of Housing and Urban Development's Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant. This grant stems from a decision made by the federal administration about a year ago to create something they call the Partnership for Sustainable Communities. It's an effort on the part of 3 federal agencies that have a great influence over local communities and the way that they develop to bring their efforts together, consolidate the way that they fund local programs in order to get the most bang for the buck. There's a recognition at the federal level that they are working in silos and are trying to use this partnership as a way of removing some of this siloed activity. The partnership was announced, like I said, about a year ago, June of last year, and there has been lots of anticipation of what the fruits of this partnership would be. And about January of this year, they announced that they had appropriated $100 million for something they called the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant. And there was lots of activity at the federal level in terms of what this would mean. In anticipation for this, anticipation of a notice of funding availability coming out, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, along with the Metro Mayor's Caucus, the Metro Area County Commissions, and a group known as the Colorado Tomorrow Alliance have been facilitating a conversation about how our region would respond to any NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, when it came out. We have been meeting weekly for about the last 3 months trying to identify a regional response to the Sustainable Communities Partnership and had a lot of fruitful and very productive conversation. The Notice of Funding Availability was finally released in June, late June, with a 60-day turnaround now. We have been scrambling ever since to meet the requirements of that NOFA. It is very prescriptive and requires a lot of detail. The key detail that brings me here this evening is this cannot be a DRCOG application. It has to be an application submitted by a regional consortium, and the NOFA actually details some of the requirements of that consortium. The key requirements of that are, number one, it has to include the principal city and county of Denver. It has to include the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments. It has to include units of government, general purpose government representing at least 50% of the population, and it has to include not-for-profit organizations. That third criteria is obviously why I'm here. DRCOG staff went in front of our board at their July meeting, July 21st, and asked for a resolution of support from all of our member governments to go back to their councils and county commissions to pass a resolution of support for this regional commission. And this is the matter in front of you this evening. The specifics of the grant are, for our regional application, really are focused on fast tracks and the transit development that is going on in this metro region generally, and the corresponding concept of urban centre, which is a key part of our MetroVision plan. MetroVision imagines a future whereby we have areas of development that are slightly higher in density than the surrounding areas and provide mixed-use, multimodal forms of transportation and provide people with opportunities to get around the region with other choices of transportation. The conversations that we've been having for the past 4 months have been predicated on really boosting that concept. As Councilman Benson and Matt both know, it's been a large part of the conversation for the current update of the MetroVision plan. One of the goals that the board, DRCOG board, is currently considering is a quantitative goal that says we would achieve 50% of new housing and 75% of new jobs in these urban centres. So there is a lot of emphasis on these centres and corridors going forward. In the past week or so, I know that a number of people have expressed some concerns about this resolution and about the federal program. I just wanted to address a couple of those. The first, obviously, is this notion of diminishing of local control. There is this sense that the federal government is telling us all what to do, and frankly, there are two arguments to that. One is the federal government has always been telling us what to do. Their money always comes with strings attached, and it has been part of the history of DRCOG to deal with that. The other thing that I would point out is DRCOG has always, the DRCOG board, the member governments that have participated in that, have always had control over that process. The processes that we put in place in this region are unique to this region. They are a response to how we, as individual communities, feel we need to respond to these federal directives. And frankly, the feds have looked at the way that we've done things in Denver and said, this is a model of how to do it in the rest of the nation. I've also heard this argument of there is nothing in it for us, each individual community, looking at this, looking at the fast tracks underpinnings of this and saying there's nothing in it for us. Frankly, this is a regional process. The feds are making it very clear that what we want to do is have strong regional integration so that when they start looking at how to invest federal dollars, not only on the housing side, but on the transportation side, wastewater treatment infrastructure, water supply, that the region has a comprehensive and coordinated plan going forward. And so every community in the metro region has some interest in the outcome of this. This grant is a little different too, in the sense that it is, we describe it as a gateway grant. The Housing and Urban Development Department has said that applicants that do well on this grant, regardless of whether they get any money or not, will be pre-qualified in essence. They will have preferred status for any future funding opportunities that come out of this Sustainable Communities Partnership. This grant is only for $5 million, I say only. The real money behind this partnership is embedded in the Livable Communities Act that Representative Perlmutter and Representative Dodd are pushing through at the federal level at the moment. The amounts of money in that grant in the bill at this point in time are $400 million. So everybody that has participated in this process to date recognizes that this is really the start of something. And doing well at this first stage is a very important part for us going forward. One other thing is that I've heard is how does this affect individual communities if they sign up to this regional application at this point in time? Does it lock us into any action that has to happen going forward? And the short answer to that is no, because again, this is federal. The feds are looking to us as a region, the individual communities to come forward with a comprehensive plan of how we want to progress these funding opportunities. We do not have to follow through on that. The individual community at some point in the future does not like the preconditions or the strings that come with federal money. They are quite welcome to sit out. And I know that Commerce City has displayed an amazing ability to sit out of the federal transportation planning process because they have not liked some of the preconditions that come with those federal dollars. And I imagine that situation will be the same going forward. So I would ask that you consider this resolution and offer a motion of support for Dr. Cox submitting this joint regional application. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I wanted to move to adopt the resolution. I understand that there could be some discussion.
There's some discussion. Discussion first. Mr. Fuller, you said discussion.
Today, how many communities in the Dr. Cobb family have decided to not pass this resolution or sit out on it?
To date, there have been 3 communities that I know of. There are a lot of actions happening this evening, and I haven't been able to keep track of all of those. The 3 communities that I know of that have not supported the resolution are Rockville County, Littleton, and Greenville Village.
No comment. Okay, yeah, I've got a question. As I was going to bring up at the end of the meeting, I went to a Metro Mayor's meeting with you were at also, but it caught me very much by surprise. I did not realize there was going to be the consternation that I saw. I would say that out of that group of 20 or 25 mayors, it was an even split as to which way they were going. There were the people who seem to have delved into the rules were the ones that were saying no, were the ones who read the resolution, said nothing in here that will talk. My concern is if we delved into those rules enough, one of my biggest concerns was if as for instance, Commerce City does not buy off on this, will that force Arvada to do whatever it is? And will they be given the chance to buy in if somebody buys out? And the alternate side of that, if somebody buys in, does that force everybody else to buy in?
If I understand the question, no, it doesn't, because this is an application submitted on the sort of coalition of the willing, if you will. The folks that want to are able to sign up and participate in the process going forward. The reality of it is a large part of, or a small part actually, part of this application is the making Metrovision compliant with the federal definition of a regional plan for sustainable development. And so Commerce City will still be part of the process regardless of whether a resolution of support comes out of this council.
This is always the toughest part because it's like what Mr. McEldowney brought up today. A lot of us aren't reading all the way down to the bottom. It happens with our stuff on our agenda. But especially with this, I wound up at a meeting where I didn't have any of this information. And then all of a sudden people are throwing stuff out at this meeting saying, this, this. And none of those things sounded right. I didn't have time in that meeting to look at all those items. For me to just say, okay, yeah, let's just do the resolution, and it backfires on us 6 months down the road, then I'm no better than I was at some other time. What I'm looking from you is some feeling or some guarantee that that's not going to happen. That somehow or other this isn't the feds coming in and pushing our buttons again.
This is obviously a change up at the federal level, and all I can do is read what I've heard them say. The two things that have resonated with me most is they recognize that making decisions about transportation and making decisions about housing and other pieces of infrastructure just don't make sense, and that they are really trying to break those silos down and make integrated decisions, or at least help fund integrated decisions down at the local level. This is not new to the Denver region. We've been doing that as part of our MetroVision process for over a decade now. And my read of their reaction is they have been studying what we do here and say this is a good model that we want to take across the country. In terms of how they take it going forward, frankly, I wouldn't like to guess. But they have made it very clear in this NOFA that one of the things that they want to do is have local guidance on how to invest in community infrastructure, infrastructure going forward. They've made it very clear that they want to have a broad-based planning process where local communities are the key stakeholder. And so they're looking at a bottom-up process rather than a top-down.
Right. Any more on this? Mr. Benson?
Yes, and if you look at the resolution itself, it says, whereas the partnership seeks to foster such communities consistent with the following livability principles, and I'll just read the titles of each of those: provide more transportation choices, promote equitable, affordable housing, enhance economic opportunities, support existing communities, coordinate policies and leverage investment, value communities and neighborhoods. Simon, I would just ask you, is this what this resolution would support?
That is the core set of principles that this partnership is all based around. And the Dr. Cobb board has in fact adopted those same principles as the basis for looking at MetroVision going forward. The logic behind that resolution was board members recognized that we're already doing most of that. We have been doing most of that in the metro region for the last decade. So they felt it was a natural step.
What could be the downside of support?
The obvious downside is, as I mentioned, this is sort of a gateway opportunity for us. The way that we're describing it is if you're not at the table, you're not going to get fed. And in fact, one of the things that this preferred status is making clear that if you're not part of the process at this initial step, you're behind the eight ball going forward. And so we don't know what additional monies are going to flow out of this federal partnership. But if we don't put in a good showing at this first step in the process, we may be behind all the other regions of the country going forward.
But if we do approve it, what would be the downside to the cities if we came back on us like the mayor said? How can you come back on us?
I haven't really thought that one through, to be honest. The process that we follow at the Dr. Cobb board table is one where we set rules that we all concur with. And frankly, you know, there's nothing that I can think of in the specifics of this application that we're putting together that the Dr. Cog board would feel compelled that they have to move forward on. We have always had this opportunity of going back to the processes that we adopt, we being the Dr. Cog board, and evaluating whether we're still comfortable with those, and if not, getting rid of them. The federal guidelines for these types of things are normally left at a high level for regional implementation, for regional interpretation. And my expectation is this will be the same instance. It will be, you tell us how you want to make this work. And the Dr. Cog board will have the opportunity to say, these are the rules that we want to follow.
There'll be a further action by the Dr. Cog board on this after the 15th, is that correct? After you got approval of over 50% of the membership?
Correct. The obvious, as I mentioned, there are minimum criteria, one of which is that the regional NPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, has to sign up. And so there will be an item on the next, the August board agenda where the Dr. Cog board, as the NPO, passes a resolution of support.
Okay. Mr. McElveen? Thanks, Senator, for coming back and speaking to this. I sense, and there was a little bit of this, I don't know if I want to call it conspiracy theory behind what this amounts to in the after meeting discussions at the end of, obviously, this past week. You know, I've spent some time looking at whether it's NADA's website or some of the other national organizations that bring together vetting bodies like Dr. Cog. And to me, what I see in this, and you touched on it a couple times, which I think was really spot on, typically in issuing the funds, as I've come to understand it, to your point, you issue transportation dollars. You issue dollars for focus on aging programs. You issue for planning in sort of a general sense. And what that process at present fails to acknowledge is that none of those are happening independently. If we have an aging population, which we know we have, and we are going to see an increase in our above 65 crowd because of the baby boomer generation, we have a challenge trying to link that community to the services that they need. So let's just put this in really simple terms. This funding is intended to allow for communities to do a better job of planning outside of Commerce City. So how do we work with Aurora and Denver, Gordon, and the rest of Adams County saying, how do all of these things come together? How does planning around our roads and bridges and rail tie into care for our aging? Or placement of wastewater treatment, as Mr. Singer mentioned earlier, we do a poor job in some respects of planning out to an appropriate time horizon. And we do these things oftentimes in silos. And so I see this as an effort to say, here's an initial allocation of funds to do a more intensive effort on your planning, beyond what we do in the MetroVision today. So anybody that's taking the time to look at the MetroVision plan, again, I think Simon touched on the fact that Dr. Cog has been sort of leading the way, and I think the MetroVision was more of the 50s, effectively.
The MetroVision plan in its current incarnation was from the early 90s, but it has been held up as a model because it does talk about transportation and land use issues in the same breath. There's no federal requirement for that to happen, and the feds have actually recognized that as a progressive step forward.
So to Simon's earlier point, we live in a community that is leading the way in many ways in how we plan across communities and across these systems. And they are now taking a lesson from us, I think, to try and say, oh wait, we might want to think differently about how we allocate funds in general. And make sure that if we give you dollars to go build this road, that it doesn't work against the priorities that have been set in regard to where you're concentrating places for your aging to live. You wouldn't want to put a concentration of that well away from a transit location or from otherwise. So this says basically there are things that relate to each other that we need to do a better job of planning around. So I don't see this as scary for us. In fact, I see this as evidence that the Denver region has been doing very much the right thing. This is an opportunity to do more of that right thing. And I think for communities that have been trying to play catch up to what Dr. Cog has been doing kind of see this as a door that's open that we need to take advantage of. Leveraging the position that Dr. Cobb has put us in as a community, as a region, and not let this go by. The potential for us to build on what this initial allocation of grant dollars might mean is an even more intelligently designed rail system, an even more intelligently designed highway system that maybe says, hey, 70 shouldn't go where it's going. That to me is sort of it in a nutshell. I don't see, I'm trying hard to see how you can make more of it than that.
One of the things that came out of the meeting was that some of the mayors were concerned that their plans for their GODs would be influenced by the federal plan, and that they were different. And if we accepted this as a Dr. Cobb and as a regional thing, that they would have to buy in on it if they did any of that development, with or without federal dollars, and that was their opinion.
And I know Greenwood Village is an example of a dear family friend who sits on council and sits in there for Greenwood Village. And I know one of their concerns is they have no desire to accommodate any sort of affordable housing component for their TOD in Greenwood Village. That's a decision that they made, and so they're going to stand firm on that. That's why they're opting out. I don't see that being a concern for a community like ours. I envision participating in a regional planning process to say, how do we look at our future TOD site on 72nd Colorado and see how we can maximize that? How does that fit into a regional picture?
If you feel comfortable with that, that's enough for me. That can take away
my off-base and my challenges.
One of the things that's very much a theme in this is prompting interjurisdictional, multi-sectoral conversations about how we plan. And the corridor perspective is the one that we've sort of narrowed in on the specifics of this grant. To address questions like that, rather than think about individual communities and what they will or will not accept in their community, think about a corridor and how that works together as a system. One of the things that this region does well is recognizing the uniqueness of individual communities, but then how we come together as a region for things that we share and value. And the whole fast track system is a good example of that. And the application that we're putting in is to try and leverage that investment that we're making in fast tracks. There is nothing in the NOFA, there is nothing in the federal dialogue that I've heard about this that says we will force you to have affordable housing in your station areas. It really is about how do you accommodate needs of different communities across the spectrum. They talk about mixed income housing specifically on a system-wide regional basis.
Okay. And I'm happy with that. Mr. Bullock?
In the future, the communities that opted out, if they see it's to their benefit, not passing this resolution, can they re-enter this? I mean, it seems to me that it's open-ended, whether you pass the resolution or not. If you're a part of Dr. Cobb, you're basically, if this goes forth as a resolution coming from Dr. Cobb, you're in. And Greenwood Village, Arapahoe, I mean, they don't have to say yes in order to benefit from it. And second, are the smaller communities going to be lost in this in any way, form? Because in this initial grant, we're talking about $5 million, correct?
Yes.
Okay, is this $5 million seed money and leverage money, or is this $5 million going to be actually aimed towards a direction to do something to convince the federal government that this is the direction that we're going in? I mean, that's why some of these communities can sit on the sidelines and watch, because they stand to lose nothing from this.
On the first question, and this is my personal opinion, I don't know that I have much sway over it, but this is a regional consortium where Dr. Cobb is the lead agency submitting this application. The regional consortium has identified fast tracks, they've identified transit corridors and the development that happens around those transit corridors as vitally important to the future of this region. And regardless of a community's choosing to opt out or not, if they have a transit corridor through their region, through their community, then they will be part of this conversation going forward. And so you're right, they could sit on the sidelines of this one, but the reality is, if we are successful in getting this grant, we'll be looking at it. The reason I veered away from talking about fast tracks per se to transit corridors, because remember how I said we've been meeting for 3 or 4 months having these conversations? The conversation at that point in time, we recognize that fast tracks is an important part of how we're growing as a region, how we're developing as a region. We recognize that it's high on the federal radar at the moment too. There's lots of federal attention on fast tracks. But we recognize it's not the only transit, it's not the only game in town when it comes to transit. And a lot of our corridors are well served by bus transit, and a lot of our communities have development plans that focus around that. And so the intent of this grant is really a staging effort. We need to get to the point where we as a region have identified what our collective priorities are so that we can present the federal government with the next bill to say this is how we build the communities that we want to build around fast tracks. But the conversations that we've been having is, even this conversation about fast tracks is the first conversation we want to have. The follow-up conversation is, okay, so now we've done this with fast tracks, how do we focus on these other transit corridors and build those communities around those? So the little communities, well, there are plenty of little communities along fast tracks corridors today. But looking at this from that regional perspective, there is an intent behind this to move to that next level, which is all transit corridors going forward.
The 36, the US 36 is a corridor.
Correct.
And there's a lot of TOD on that, but it has nothing to do with fast tracks.
That is correct.
And see, I mean, I think too many people actually get siloed into everything that has to do with transit, has to do with fast tracks or trains or something. They don't realize that some of these corridors can work independent of fast tracks and even better without it. Or complement fast tracks.
I-25 is a transit corridor. There's bus service that goes along I-25, and so it's not inconceivable that the communities along the I-25 corridor start to plan development that focuses in on that corridor.
Mr. Benson, then Ms. Carson, and Mr. McIntyre.
Now, let the discussion continue, because I just wanted to move to adopt the resolution.
Ms. Carson.
Good evening, Simon. I met you as soon as I was seated on council. I came down and attended one of your presentations. You're quite the educator. You do a great job. And actually, I'm really glad that you brought up different types of transit. Not that I don't think fast tracks is a great thing. I think most of us who live up north here have, I don't know the nice word for it. They've done a great job down south. They seem to forget us up here all the time. I do agree with the buses. The problem with buses is they're not always on time, and that. But I do know that there are cities out there that have actually perfected that. Run a circle ring or something with buses around their city, and it's working quite well. So yeah, I do believe that we can see something in the future here, even if we don't use the word fast track in there, that would really improve our quality for housing and for people to get around. So is there any, I don't know what kind of coalitions between Dr. Cog and fast track, is there any?
RTD and Dr. Cog are planning partners, so the regional transportation plan that is put together by the Dr. Cog board is a collaborative effort between RTD. And so fast tracks, well, transit generally is an important part of the whole regional transportation program.
Okay. That's probably it, but thank you for your presentation.
Mr. McIntyre.
Who's going to take that back to this? second that I started to move earlier.
Mr. Benson, if there's no further discussion, Mr. Benson, do you want to make the motion, and then Mr. McIntyre, you want to second it?
Sure, thank you. I move to adopt resolution 2010-40. In fact, second for the hearing.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to the city attorney.
Title reads, Resolution 2010-40, resolution in support of Denver Regional Council of Governments comprehensive joint application to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program.
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. Been moved and seconded. City attorney has read the title. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. You did a wonderful job. You didn't have a believer when you came in. Okay, the second is Resolution 2010-45, a resolution setting certain administrative hearing fees. I'm going to ask City Manager Flannery and introduce staff to please come forward to open the discussion of Resolution 2010-45.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council, I'll just turn this over to Bob.
This resolution is based upon action that was taken by the City Council when you approved the revised Commerce City Municipal Code. In the Municipal Code, there is an entire section that deals with an administrative hearing for certain types of violations in the city. And the effect of that administrative process is to remove those types of cases from the municipal court. And the benefit to the city will be a more expedited process and a less expensive process, both from the city's point of view and from the individual's point of view. Examples of the types of cases involved here will, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but for example, dog violations, animals running at large, weed violations, certain types of zoning violations. Anyway, the hearing process is scheduled then to handle those types of cases. And the intent here is to make the process a self-sustaining process so that it's cost-effective from the city's point of view. So if a case goes before the hearing officer, and we will have a hearing officer then, aside from the judge, that will hear these cases administratively, and the fees then for appearing before the hearing officer will only be assessed if the individual is found to be responsible or guilty of the violation. These fees that are proposed in the resolution are fees that were gleaned after looking at what other cities are doing to give us some kind of comparison, and they are certainly comparable to what other cities are doing, and we recommend that these fees be adopted in order that the hearing process that was implemented in the municipal code can move forward as originally planned. So we recommend approval of the resolution.
I'm just ready to make a motion.
Okay, there are 4 people that are here. Any other one discussion? Ms. Carson?
Mr. Taylor, at any time, would they then be sent from that hearing to be in front of the judge?
There is an appeal process that if the hearing is held and the person is found responsible, the process for an appeal then would be in the court system, but not initially.
Okay, and you had mentioned dog issues.
As an example.
Yeah, and I do know that there's probably some dog issues that come with a penalty that could be a jail sentence. Would that?
The hearing officer in this administrative process cannot impose a jail sentence.
So how would we decipher who goes in front of the hearing commissioner instead of?
The ordinance itself spells out the types of cases that go before the hearing officer.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, move to approve resolution
Resolution 2010-45.
Second. A motion and a second to approve resolution 2010-45. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll see adjourned.
Resolution 2010-45, resolution setting certain administrative hearing fees.
Okay. Motion and a second, so you change the title. Request for voice vote, please. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Thank you very much. One ordinance on second reading is ordinance 1831, an ordinance instructing Commerce City staff to approve the installation of both urban access at Commerce City Plaza Final Number 2, Lot 6, for the submission of a development plan that meets all other city standards pertaining to approval of such development plan. Mr. Planner,
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think if you'd like staff to present, we weren't anticipating that. We can have somebody come up.
Okay. Mr. Bullock.
Move forward with the motion.
Okay, yeah, I think we'll have discussion first. Mr. McAvoy, did you have discussion?
I was going to take better out on the request to have staff present. I know Mr. Benson submitted some questions about the process. I see some questions about the process. I know that we've had at least a high-level comparison of the typical process versus that followed Mr. Sandu heard that case here, and I'd like to have the top group using this been for a crossover.
In that case, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if Mr. Rigger wants to introduce it or Mr. McGraw can come up and address that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. To address the question of process in this particular case, we put together a very basic, very simplified diagram of the typical process followed to submit and have a development plan approved by the city. And we try to relate that to the process that my understanding that Mr. Sandu followed. On the top of this slide is the standard process, as I would describe it, that's followed in most zoning approval cases. City staff has regular meetings with folks considering some type of application. Might be the submission of a development plan, might be applying to rezone property, submit subdivision. Initially, oftentimes what happens is folks arrange a time to meet the city staff and what we refer to as a pre-application meeting. It's a meeting in which to discuss the detailed requirements that have to be met for a particular approval that an applicant is seeking, maybe to discuss discretionary standards that the city has. That would then tend to lead to an application. An application would be submitted. Again, it could be for a zoning change, it could be for a development plan, it could be an application for a variance that would go to the Board of Adjustment. City staff, and in some cases outside agencies, review those applications. If there are deficiencies in the application, it's returned back to the applicant to fix those deficiencies and then resubmit. The plan is re-reviewed by city staff and agencies. In some cases, an applicant might request a variance and then go to the Board of Adjustment to decide that variance. Public hearings are then presented to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission reviews those cases and makes recommendations to the City Council, who ultimately makes the final decision in those cases. It's my understanding, and I was not part of every meeting that Mr. Sandu had with city staff. I did attend some of them. It's my understanding that Mr. Sandu, over the course of about a year, had several what we would describe as pre-application meetings. Mr. Sandu was considering purchasing a piece of property on Parkway Drive and applying for various zoning approvals to be able to construct a new liquor store on that site. Through those pre-application meeting discussions, a key issue was Mr. Sandu's desire to have a full movement access on site. But to my knowledge, Mr. Sandu did not submit an application of any kind. The normal process would have been to submit an application for a development plan. But as far as I know, Mr. Sandu did not submit an application to city staff to review a development plan. In this particular case, access would normally be something that's discussed and resolved as part of the review of the development plan. In this particular case, Mr. Sandu was frustrated with responses from the city staff about the full movement access. He applied to the city council, essentially appealing staff's informal decision that the access that he sought did not meet the city's access standards. Is that helpful in answering that question about process?
I think it starts, but actually, for everyone's benefit, ask you to take us through the rest of the flow. Talk about how the example of the issues that have been raised in the pre-application, this informal process that we've discussed in this session would typically be vetted through our existing bodies.
The Land Development Code, well, let me back up. Essentially, what Mr. Sandu needs to build the new liquor store on the parcel that he's interested in on Parkway Drive is approval of a development plan. I think in this particular case, he may also need a conditional use permit and given some standards that relate specifically to liquor stores. But the Land Development Code has a very specific process for the submission of a development plan, review of a development plan. It lays out that staff is allowed to approve development plans at the administrative level, and if a development plan is denied, applicants then have the ability to appeal that denial of the development plan to the Board of Adjustment. In this particular case, Mr. Sandu received informal feedback from the city staff that we would not be in a position to approve the access he sought. The normal process would have been to submit that development plan, laying out clearly project that he would like to build, how many parking spaces, what sort of traffic would be generated, the access that he would like to have. The city staff would go through a more formal review process of that development plan. If at the end his development plan was not approved, for one or more reasons, in this case because of access, he could have appealed that denial to the Board of Adjustment. If the Board of Adjustment in turn were to agree with Mr. Sandu and overrule staff's decision on access, then Mr. Sandu's development plan will continue through the rest of the administrative review process of this point.
Yes, you can see in the packet that there's an email from me to the council and Mr. Mattel. And I sent my copy of this email. I'm asking Mr. Flannery if there have been any other examples of a developer or business being granted any exceptions to any process that developers and builders go through to obtain approval. I got a response to that, but it was a response that didn't answer that question. What it answered was whether there had been any situation where a developer or business was granted access. In other words, the answer was limited to an access issue by the city council, regardless of whether or not a development plan is submitted. That makes it very specific to Mr. Sandu's situation. And I asked a much, much broader question. And when I pointed that out, Mr. Flannery's response was this would be a tall order, and that it would require a vote of the whole council to spend the time coming up with that kind of an answer. I meant for this to be as broad as possible, and I sure did not get an answer to that effect. And also, I see that there was an an email from a John Buckley, who's strongly opposed to this. It's my understanding that Mr. Buckley is the owner of the Parkway Center. Is that a correct statement? Is Mr. Buckley the owner of the Parkway Center? I think so. He is?
I believe Mr. Buckley owns the portion of the center where Mr. Sanders' current liquor store is located.
So if this is approved and Mr. Sanders gets to move, Mr. Buckley is going to lose a tenant. Therefore, he has a big financial interest in the outcome of this vote. He's got a dog in the fight, so to speak. As do we all. Well, I don't have any dog in this fight. I don't have any financial interest in the outcome of the vote. Right. My interest is in keeping a business in this city and allowing people to do the things within reason that they want to do without disrupting. But anyway, the question that I asked was very broad. That there have been any exceptions to any process by any developer. I didn't get an answer to that question. I suspect that there have been exceptions, the most recent being the annexation of the flea market, where we harmonized our existing code and rules to accommodate the needs of the applicant. And I think that was a good thing to do, because that was necessary. But I still can't see why this is going to create such a... We've got traffic engineers, we've got urban planners. Probably a way to work out this full movement access so it's not going to endanger anybody, certainly not as much as allowing a tenant at the flea market. That's all.
I remember this gentleman, this business owner, has been trying to do this since Perry Vanderveer. He's trying to go through the process and gets to a certain part of it, and they're denying him the front access, and I'm just mystified because we just built a new McDonald's that has a front entrance on 104th. The right next door, we have from there we have our car wash. It has a front entrance. We have a front entrance to the new car wash coming off of Highway 85 there, and the frontage road where people sometimes get off of there and speed quite heavily, but yet this certain businessman is denied that, and I just don't think it's right. And also the Payless Shoes, when I was in there a couple of years ago before they closed down, the manager was telling me how poor business that he had because nobody could even find that place back there because of the back entrance. And to me, that's just, it just isn't right that some business owners are given that privilege and others are not.
You know, that's the question. I think every time we've had this discussion, and you know, unfortunately, this hasn't followed the process where I assume this data would have been provided, but we've yet to hear anything on a traffic analysis that relates specifically to how a full movement intersection would positively or negatively impact the rider's bottom line. A full movement intersection to move to a parking lot that has to be connected to the rest of the parking lot. I don't understand what difference a right in the right apple versus a full movement will make when the engineering community has given us clear guidance that a full movement intersection is counter to their guidance. If I could see the facts that showed me that the analysis has been done that shows I'm going to see a difference of $10 a day, $100 a day, $1,000 a day. What is the criteria under which we're making this decision? Are we going to jeopardize this man's livelihood if we don't allow a full movement intersection? I have yet to see the fact-based input that gives us that sense. As to the examples of other properties that have a driveway into their property, I don't know that McDonald's is a good example or a car wash in Bell Creek are good examples. I'll use the example of our neighbors to the north who have a large retail complex that's taking shape. If you look at the big picture of how that's constructed, you have zones that have an entrance and that have interior movement around that property it would be, what we're talking about here would be the equivalent of cutting additional curb cuts off of Prairie Center Boulevard, Parkway, randomly into that highly architected, highly engineered retail site. I just, again, this is, because we don't want to go through the process, we're going to run it through city council, and we're going to appeal to our emotions, and we're going to approve this because, well, I still don't know why.
We're lining up to go around again, so I'm going to interject mine here before we continue. Going along with what Mr. McElhenney says, I think it's not so much the curb cuts as the unintended consequences. We have made a decision to do curb cuts or not do curb cuts, depending on what the road winds up today. That curb cut's going to open up every other business. I know that most of us sat here when we did the same similar thing with Walgreens. Walgreens about 104 said, we want to come in this way. This is the only way we're going to do it. Staff said no. It came to the council. Council said, staff said no. So that's going to be worked another way. I don't see Walgreens being any different business than anybody else's. The same challenge is, I've been reading the emails. There's going to need to be a variance on parking spaces because the building is so big. We're going to need some kind of variance for drainage because that hasn't been taken into consideration here. I've been told that it's not even going to meet the liquor license 1,500 feet rule, though I have not heard that specifically, but that's been one of the other things that's come up. How many variances is it going to take in order to pass this through, and then what are you going to do for the next person, the next person, and the next person? It would be different. I'd even feel better if the planning came through with a 3-2 vote and staff says, well, maybe we could, maybe we can't. Every single person who came up to this, with the exception of one, said, no, this doesn't work. Even, my recollection, even the people working for the business owner even said, well, no, it's probably not the best, but it'll be okay. Well, I'm not sure. When I came onto council, this is how we used to do things. People would come and say, this is what I want to do, and we would bless it. We've tried to get away from that. Do we want to have to do every one of these things here? Even if, as Mr. McElhenney said, and as Mr. McBroom said, we've gone through the whole system. No, 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 no. Then he came back to us. Okay, let's follow the system. We haven't even followed the system yet. We don't even know that he's going to get variances on these other things. I'm looking at the owner of the King Supers Plaza and saying, if that were my business and I was against it, don't come to me looking for any privileges on drainage and parking, because I'm not giving them to you. I don't know that he's that way. I'm just trying to open this up. I don't know if this 1,500-foot rule is going to, 2,500-foot rule is going to apply in this case or not, but it seems it's going to. And if you grant him a variance for that after you just did not grant a variance for somebody up on the north side, how do you make that right? How do you justify that in your own mind that says it's okay for this guy, but it sure wasn't okay for the other guy? The rules need to be the rules. They need to follow some kind of order. And you know what? I got 15 months left. In 15 months, y'all are going to do whatever it is you want to do. But right now, why am I paying these people to make decisions if we just overrule them for no good reason? What I'm trying to do is take the personalities out of this and say, I don't care who that person is. Whoever that business is this is make it right. And the same reason you say, well, this small business can't get people in and out of his place because we didn't grant him the access. And you say, okay, what about all the small businesses that are next to King Supers? They expected when they came in that everybody that comes to that shopping center is going to go by their place. So if you want to have Asian food, if you want to have a bank, if you want to have all of those things, you at least had to go by and say, hey, I'm already at King Supers. I can pick up liquor, I can make my deposit, I can pick up dinner, take home, and do all of those things, and pick up a big screen TV so I can watch the game on Sunday afternoon. I think we're just getting, we need to figure out a way to separate out the personality of this and to say, if this was any other business, would you do the same thing? And the answer's got to be no, because you can go through the list up on 104th every time they wanted their own curb cut. The bank wanted the curb cut, 7-Eleven wanted the curb cut, the gas station wanted a curb cut. They all wanted curb cuts, and we all said no. But it was said no. How is this one different? Okay, now we're going to start through the list again because everybody's lit up again. Mr. Benson.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a situation where there was no curb cut going in. Up at 72nd in Quebec, there was a 7-Eleven out there. Does anyone have personal knowledge of why that 7-Eleven closed down or closed out or however you want it? Why did that happen? I've heard that it's because they had no access. Their business was so adversely affected. I don't know whether that's the same situation, but there we go. We stuck to our guns and we lost a business. Here we have a man that's been in this community for what, 25 years? If anybody's going to get any special consideration, that's what this is. I think it ought to be somebody that's blessed us with their business over the last 25 years. And as I pointed out, there may not be a precedent for this exact situation, but there are, I suspect, a lot of precedents for some exceptions being granted to some developers at some time in the past. And so those are precedents, so to speak, where we have to take each situation as it exists in a subjective manner and say, this is what we think ought to happen. That's our job. We have the staff to advise us of what they think. That doesn't mean that we always have to accept that, although we do 99% of the time, I think. But there comes a time when there should be an exception. I think that this is one of those times. Thank you.
I want to be clear, I applaud Mr. Sendry's long time commitment to our community. I don't want that to, that is not a part of the discussion in my mind. I think the mayor raised a good point earlier about making the rules of as we go. And I think we had talked before about predictability, and if I were going to do business anywhere, where would I go do business? I would go do business where the process was defined in black and white, and I knew that if I started at A, I was going to go to B, and I was going to go to C, and I was going to go to D, and E, and F. And I might have some friction at certain points in the process, or back and forth with staff that we had some lively discussions about the proposal. But at the end of the day, I knew that the next guy that came and the next guy that came were going to be subject to the exact same process, constructed. This council, we heard earlier, there's a likelihood that the property in question is going to fall within the boundary of our current ordinance that limits locations of liquor stores. Well, I don't know that. I don't know that, Ms. Teeter, because it hasn't gone through the process. I don't have that data. So I'm guessing. I'm going to believe off the top of my head. You know, this council just voted down against the wishes of the planning commission, granting a brand new business that wanted to come into Commerce City and open up a liquor store inside the city, had a beautiful presentation, had invested in improving the property, had a beautiful site plan. We denied it because a liquor store exists in the county, just down the street. Why would we do that? That's awfully business friendly. So next time somebody wants to come open a liquor store in our city, what are we going to do? Are we going to start tossing a coin? I'm out of examples.
Okay, Mr. Bullock.
I admire everybody's discussion on this, and we are using apples and oranges and anything we can to make this the bad guy, and this is what's happening, and he's asking his curb cut, and rules have been circumvented on this council, and the same people that call the kettle black are the ones that do it, And they sit up and they act like they don't realize that they have been privileged or they have gone to different agencies and got things bypassed without council approval. That required council approval. And council never, or if council did know something about it, council had a blind eye to it. I mean, everybody in the city knows about it, so I mean, it isn't something that is it's a big mystery. We know that there are people on this council that went down to CDOT. We know that they circumvented traffic engineers in our city to get a light placed in a place where it shouldn't have been placed. And I was the one that sat on the board for this stretch of highway, State Highway 44, and I know where the light was supposed to go and where it was supposed to be. So nobody's pulling the wool over my eyes. I know the property that was involved. And it just so happens the same property is involved with a member of this council's family. So I mean, if we're going...
Excuse me, sir. You were wrong.
Okay.
I don't like you passing bad information.
I've done traffic engineer studies that light should have never been there. Now, do you want to, am I wrong on that?
Yeah,
I think now. The point's been made. Let's move on to...
Okay, I mean, yeah, and it is my point and it is my time speaking. I know I sat on that committee for many a year on State Highway 44, and I know what was the clearance between Highway 85 and Bell Creek Boulevard to put a light. So if you try to blow smoke up somebody's leg and call them a chimney, don't make it with me, because I know the rules and I knew where all the bodies are buried. So if you want to talk this, did council know that anybody went down to CDOT? Was council aware that anybody acted in the scope of their authority and went down and did it behind council's back? That was a council decision. It wasn't a one or two person decision. It was a council decision, and if it was circumvented around council, don't sit here and act like something didn't happen that never happened before.
You know, we got the point.
Okay, yeah, but I'm going to make some more points.
104th and Highway.
104th and Bell Creek Boulevard.
Okay, so we got that one.
So I want to, if you're going to bring examples of how we're going to do this, this, and this, and you're already going to put things out there. Oh, it's within the 2,500 foot limit. So you're bringing down into the process already. You don't know this within the 2,500 foot level. Somebody's moving less than 250 feet, and already you've got somebody that's counted it out. You know, are you going to tell me that there's not enough parking spaces? Or you already know this? You're going to tell me there's not enough drainage? You already know this? Well, what's funny is when you look at this, pre-application meetings, city council, then the process. The process is still going to be followed, and what we're trying to say is that the process is not going to be followed. Sometimes you do have to come to city council. Sometimes you do have to, when you run into a wall, sometimes you have to climb over it or dig under it. And if you think that just because this is somebody else that we can paint a picture of them and say this has only happened now, it isn't only happening now, it's happened now, it's happened then, and I do have other examples. Where this council has been circumvented, where time has been spent, where money has been spent, and this council never approved it. So don't sit up here and say that this was, when I came on the council, the Good Old Boy Network ran. The Good Old Boy Network is anytime you do something and you don't get the council's approval and you try to make it right. And that's why they call it Good Old Boy. They don't call it the boys, it's a good old boy. And I've got examples and I've got proof. So if anybody ever wants to dispute me, I can bring it here and lay it out.
Mrs. Carson.
I've listened to everybody, and Mr. McEldowney, I really have listened to you. I have not been seated on council long. I had not been here long when we had the Mile High Supermarket come in front of us. So if you're telling me that I need to sit here and reasonably think about these things, that might not have been the best thing for me to sit through being seated as soon as I was. People talk about safety. To me, when we amended the International Fire Code, we had to amend it in order to allow that tent
With all due
to
respect.
be a permanent structure.
With all due respect. And I will seek legal counsel's clarification. We did not amend the International Fire Code.
We approved of it being amended. The
We
fire,
approved a variance or an allowable,
An allowable interpretation based on the fire marshal's opinion.
we changed the practice that is followed if you practice that code. It was very clear to me. I printed it out. I made sure other council members knew exactly what it said. I did exactly what you're doing. I tried to bring everybody to what I thought was clarity of how you cannot do this. Didn't work. I'm still bothered by it. I will probably always be bothered by it. But it was a lesson to be learned that this council has free minds. The rules don't always fit. That is what council's job is. Council and staff have different roles to play. When they're on the same, it's wonderful. But there are times that staff thinks different than council, council thinks different than staff, and that's the role of city council in my opinion. I sat up here and I listened to things, and it has seemed like we have thrown a roadblock at every time that a businessman who's been in our city for 25 years has tried to do something. To me, common is when you hit that first process of the pre-screening hearings, and you're told no in those pre-screening hearings, and you are the small businessman, you're not the large developer. Things are very difficult for you. You don't have money to invest, to keep moving on. Why would you go to that third process when you know that if you've been told no in that first one, you're going to continue to be told no? Why would you not do exactly what he's done and come in front of council? We talk about the accidents that were there. What are we talking about? 3 years and it was 10 accidents or something? Well, it was 2, one of them made another, and one of them doesn't count because it was honest. If you're going to blame the liquor store, you can't. That was a Sunday. Liquor stores aren't open. But it really just doesn't set well with saying that we have to follow processes when I was taught immediately getting on this council that there are exceptions to following processes.
if I may add just a comment. Sure. That discussion that we had that night, that very heated discussion, took place after every box on that screen had been passed through. Almost every box on that screen had been passed through. Extensive dialogue, following submissions of detailed plans.
You have to be fast that day. You can't do anything that quickly. I mean, that thing was laid out, midnight hours.
I'm not arguing the fast track issue, but the parties in question put on paper all of the data necessary to facilitate that discussion. And our partners, including the fire department, engaged, roll up sleeves and engaged in that discussion. So I would love to debate that with you over coffee sometime, but my comments will stand. Appreciate your comments as well.
I agree with everybody. I think everybody's got people all basically on the same page here. The only, I guess the only thing that I have seen in the past, well, we've done this, where staff has come to us with a set of plans and a development, and they're saying this shouldn't work, and we look at it and say it makes sense to us, we'll roll. The problem I have here, Mr. Evans is an excellent leader. There's no doubt. And I want to keep him in conversation. There's no doubt about that. The only problem I have, and the reason I can't get on board with this, because I've known him for a long time. The only reason I can't get on board is because I can't see what we're doing. We're working on it. If he would just bring a development plan that says, this is what the traffic council is going to do, this is where I'm going to have the building, my parking, these are the variances I'm going to need, whatever, the whole picture, I would be all over. But I can't vote on something I can't understand. And folks, we don't have enough information. I mean, we have a lot of emotions, but really, realistically, when we need to talk about flea markets or 104, we're talking about this man right here. If he would just brought in a picture for me and saying, this is how it's going to lay out, this is what I need to traffic flow, I'd be all over it. I'd go for it. But I don't have anything I go to bed saying, that was a good decision. The only reason I would vote for it is because I like it. And that's not why I need to vote for something. I need to vote on a program or a process or a picture that I can sink my teeth into. So, folks, I really wished, we have short-term plans for and these schemes. But we've done that.
One at a time. One at a time.
We've done that after we've had all the information. We don't have any information.
There's the plan, Tony.
Finally.
You see something you can think
So I have a plan, and I just got this. So we've already had two or three votes on this, and we just give a plan. What we need is a study session to look at what his plan is, so we can. I need to understand where we're coming from, and I want to push it off. I know the man wants to build a business, and I want him to build a business because he builds good businesses. But my God, we're way putting the cart in front of the horse, and this is a good horse to put in front of him. But this is not sufficient. That's not going to do it for me. That's all I have.
No, that's not, I promise. So, I've asked a couple times on this before as well, and I haven't had an updated answer yet, but it's my understanding that Mr. Cindy does not own the property in question. It's my understanding that there is not an actual option signed agreement in place. So, I'm open to update if either of those facts are misunderstandings, but just as an example, this would, in my context, be the equivalent of me going to a city council person after talking to staff, after saying, I want to build a deck and I want to paint councilperson Carson's house. I don't own the house. I don't have an option to buy the house. But my God, I want to put a deck on that house. I don't want to paint it purple. And having council say that yes, you can, even though I don't yet own that property. So, in contrast, the typical developer who does not yet own the property has an option on that property, an agreement with the current landowner that says, should I receive permission through the process to do X, then we have an agreement that I will purchase your property for such and such a price. I'm not aware of that form of an agreement in place. I would expect that would be. So above all of my other comments, have a hard time granting permission for someone to do something to a piece of property that they don't yet have claim to. Thank you.
Mr. Bowman?
I want to make the motion for ordinance 1831. Move to approve 1831.
We're still in discussion, Mr. Peter.
Just real quickly, if this gentleman was treated like the owner of the new car wash that's being put in, I didn't see a traffic study. I mean, it just does not make sense to me that a few of these businesses can have front access and others are denied. Nobody can answer me why. That road was even closed down for 3 days while they put some kind of a big water pipe in there. But he did not have to go through that guideline process. So anyway, that's all I have to say, and I'm ready for a vote too.
And Mr. Bowman, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, now Mr. Bowman.
Move for approval of ordinance 1831 on second reading.
Mr. Peter? A motion and a second. to approve 1831, requesting a roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry.
Final readings and ordinance instructing Commerce City staff to approve the installation of a pole movement access at Commerce City Plat of Property Number 2, Lot 6, on submission of a development plan that meets all other city standards pertaining to approval of such development plan.
Okay, you have a motion to second. City Attorney Sheriff Jackson, Christopher, roll call vote, please. Showing 5 yeses. Motion passes. Thank you. On to administrative council business. Again, this is not reports. This is not asking to have some service done at some place in the city. This is something where you're asking for something from the council. Anyone that has administrative council business, Mr. Madden.
Last council meeting, we received copies of the templates used to conduct the review of city manager and city attorney. The request was that all council members provide another review of those. Unfortunately, we completed the reviews using that template and provide suggested modifications to any questions, additional questions, or otherwise. I've yet to receive any comment or feedback that was yet. We need to have that closed out on the Wednesday for the business, so that we can then schedule a meeting of the review committee to plan the timing and issuing of the upcoming reviews for the first half of this year.
Is anybody in council have a challenge with getting that out by Wednesday? Would you like to
I would prefer to get a affirmative or
okay,
declarative yes.
You got it, sir. Anything else? Okay, I have a small question. I did miss a couple of weeks of council meetings, so if this is something that was agreed to by the council seated at that particular time, that's fine. I've got a thing on boards, commissions, and rental property task force. It was my understanding at the last meeting that I recall that the first thing that we were going to get back from the task force was some type of charter. I either didn't get it or it hasn't been shown yet. And then we're looking for applications for people on a task force that I'm not even sure that the council's approved yet. And I'm open to correction. That's not a problem because I did miss 2 meetings, and if it was corrected at another time, but it is not coming to my attention that we even approved that we're going to have this task force at this point, that we still haven't seen a charter as to what they thought they were going to do. Mr. Benson.
Well, there was a charter, I believe it was approved, Mr. McBroom, helped us prepare the charter, and the council did specifically authorize the formation of the task force. I don't think you were here, and I think Ms. Snyder was.
Can we, I'm listening to 2 council members here that are in agreement with me that I guess all 3 of us were not at the meeting. So I'm open. Mr. McIntyre?
I'm trying to recall where we left that. I think there was a great discussion tonight that draft charter was raised about what the ultimate goal of the committee was going to be. I don't know that it ever was resolved.
It was. What we resolved was the 4 points on the charter, and then the next step was to put out to the citizens that we had so many people that were going to be landlords, so many people that were going to be citizens, and so many people that were going to be citizen members and city councilors. And we instructed the city to put it out in the newspapers and everything. So we did approve the charter, and we did approve sending out notification through our paper, through the website, everything for application. So those steps have been taken. The next thing was after we get the group together and we do interviews, because we've approved that the city council as a whole would do interviews. So this is,
I now absolutely remember the last part of that where we essentially said that the members of the committee conduct the interviews. And you now.
Okay. Could you just, why is it only committee members that are elected?
Well, we've got working commission review coming up for the first hearing and quality of hearing.
Right.
And one of the challenges that we've historically had, at least during my tenure, is getting 9 people to sit in the same room at the same time. We have to 10 to 12 other people. So I think one of the things we offered up is that we would grant the committee the authorization to conduct review interviews for those members with the committee alone, and if others wanted to join, they could join.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking about this earlier when the question did come up. I do remember having a discussion. I remember saying that we would go ahead and put the notification out there. We would call for members, landlords, and the members, and that we would advertise that. But I do remember one of the first things that committee, once it did come together, was going to do was sit down and decide whether or not there really needed a POS or certification program or not. So even though we voted to form the task force, it was never voted or approved to actually have the rental certification program. Those were two completely separate things. So we were going to just take it one step at a time, and the first step was just to get a group together, and then that group would come together and talk and have meetings and decide whether or not it was even something we wanted to do to move forward with rental certification. So just want to make sure I clarify that just because we put the group together doesn't mean that we said that we were going to move forward with rental certification. I think it's pretty important to make sure we clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Benson. Well, we're taking it as Ms. Snyder said, one step at a time. We did approve to move ahead with this process. As I recall, I suggested that all the council participate in the interviews for that task force. But it was brought up, no, just the task force committee should conduct those interviews. And so we said, sure, that'll be fine. But if anybody else on this council wants to come to those interviews, I don't have a problem with that. If everybody on this council wants to show up for those interviews, then please be my guest. We're going to, we have an inter-office memorandum from Ms. Bauer about the applications that she's received, and I suspect that we're going to set a date and a time for our task force interviews. And as Ms. Snyder says, that task force is going to decide what it's going to recommend to this council, and of course the final word on that rests with the 9 members of this council. That's always the way it has been. It should be always the way it will be, and I don't know why there seems to be difficulty in understanding that that's the process that we're going through.
Well, it's only because it's on here. I mean, it's in black and white. It just says that you're responsible for conducting the interview with anybody that show up. That's the only reason I asked.
Well, as I recall, it was going to be limited to the members of the task force committee, but I was just talking to Ms. Bauer, and as part of the minutes that we approved, it says that the interviews will be conducted by the members of the task force committee and any other council member who wants to attend. That wasn't how I recalled it. She listens to the tape.
That is how it was, how we decided. We put it out there that evening that if anyone on council wanted to attend the interviews, that they were certainly welcome.
That's fine with me. All 9 of our council want to attend these interviews, that's fine with me.
And of course, the final decision does rest with the council, even after the recommendations of the three.
Final decision
on that, right?
On everything rests with this council.
That is correct, Mr. Benson. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, just one other. Right now, there's an invite out for NE, to go to NE to finish up some work on bringing people back in November. They're going to have mayors there. This is so important to me that I am more than willing to turn this over to Mayor Pro Tem Snyder and to staff, whether it be Mr. Flannery or Ms. Nealon, to handle this, to take care of this, that gets the personalities out of it, but we're running out of time is the problem. I've had 2 more invites. We're trying for 2 different areas of the country. There's just no way that we can handle it. We've also had information received for both Australia, Germany, and Mexico. So Commerce City is becoming a center for at least people who are looking at the Western United States. And I think the only reason is because prior to this time, we've been fairly open and welcoming. But what I would like from council to do is to appoint Ms. Snyder as the point for landing and whatever needs to be done with NLC, and for Mr. Flannery to be the point, and he can assign anybody on the staff he feels, and work it that way. Mr. Benson.
Yes, I believe that I made the comment when Mr. Barber was here and made his excellent presentation that if we're going to spend money to send anybody to China, I want to hear from him again so that he can tell us as specifically as he can how that's going to benefit the city. I'd like to hear from Mr. Barber. I was very impressed with his presentation. I'd like to be able to ask him some questions about exactly how this is supposed to, and I understand there are no guarantees, but I'd like to hear from this man who's our expert on Chinese relations. And I know that you have made some good contacts over there, but again, the city manager is the chief executive officer of this city. And I would like to see the city manager and our director of economic development become more hands-on involved in this process, because that's what we're paying you for, Jerry. You're the CEO.
Okay, Ms. Snyder.
Yes, I just have a few thoughts on this. First of all, Mr. Barber, I think pretty well did a pretty good presentation of what we have gained so far, what we have to gain. I don't think there was much more that he could say than what he said. I think he pretty much laid it out there. And, I'm more than happy to accept the opportunity to go. However, I'm going to throw it out there that, none of this would have been possible without the mayor. And so I understand the way the relationships work as far as how they view things. The mayor and the vice mayor, they don't actually use the term mayor pro tem, they use the term vice mayor. It's kind of a mayor, vice mayor kind of, it's just the way it works, it's a different, I don't really know how to explain it, but that's the way it was explained to me, that's kind of how things work. And so, I'm going to throw it back out there that, I am more than happy to accept if the council wants me to go. However, I still think that the mayor should be going, and that he is the one who started the relationship. And so I think it's very gracious of him to step aside and be willing to send me, in his place. I would be more than happy to accompany him or whatever the council decides they want to do. But I still think my personal opinion is that, the mayor started the relationship and that he should certainly be a part of continuing it on. But I firmly believe no matter what happens that we need to continue the relationship and foster the relationship. Otherwise, we're going to lose it, and all the work that the mayor's done up to now will be lost.
I think at the end of the Mr. Barber update, one of the things that I raised was just need a plan. Just outline what trips are necessary, what the intent of those trips are, how they fit together, and let's be smart about sending the fewest people for the greatest impact. I don't know that at this point it's appropriate to shuffle the deck on who's interacting with whom. I think it's important to expand the relationship so that there's a deeper bench, if you will, from the ability for others to interact or pick up the load at some point. But if it's necessary to help secure the first event here in Denver, and that's a building block, then I'm in support of that. I just think we get in trouble or we get caught up if all of a sudden there's a tab and we've got to pay and we don't fully understand what the tab is for. So, a couple PowerPoint pages or a simple email that outlines the intent, purpose, the duration, I think our meetings, etc. That we can see, our citizens can understand. And, we're not asking to have a camera on your back pocket so we can watch what's going on. It's as simple as saying, here's the plan, and here's the cost to execute that plan.
Mr. Benson. First of all, I want to say that I agree with everything that Mr. McElveen just said. And an issue that was raised, we do have term limits, and both the mayor and the mayor pro tem are going to be term limited in 15 months. And so we need to get other people involved in this process. The city manager, I assume, is going to be here after the next 15 months. He's the person who's going to be around here. He's not term limited. He's our employee. He's not an elected official, so he can't be, he'll be around here. So I just, we've got to get some other people involved in this process. Those that have knowledge of this kind of, these kinds of business dealings. I presume that Mr. Flannery does. And I know that Brittany Morris does. She understands economic development. That's what we're looking for here. Seems to me like these are the two people, maybe go over there with the mayor or the mayor pro tem, but also make sure that the city manager and our director of economic development are introduced to these people. And maybe, I don't know whether they understand term limits or not, but just explain that to them. That in 15 months, these people are going to be gone, not through some fault of their own, but just because the law prevents them from running again. But I don't want to go up to November of 2011 without them understanding that they're not going to be dealing with the same people after that time. So I would like to have the presentation that Mr. McElhenney just outlined, so that we can make a decision and maybe get. I understand what Mr. Barber said about it's the title. It's not necessarily the job description that they look at. And I'm just thinking that these people are not dumb. They're capable of being educated about our city government process. And if somebody sits down with them, I'm sure Mr. Barber is capable of doing that, and says, we want to introduce you to our city manager because he's the chief executive officer of this city. And he needs to become involved with you, and that's the way I would like to see it proceed. I would need more information before I would vote to spend money to send anyone over there. I want to find out what we're spending our money on, and that's about all I have to say.
Yeah, just a quick response to that. I certainly have no problem if, City Manager Flannery wants to go, or Ms. Morris, or anyone that, the council deems, necessary to go. And, there's been some discussion about possibly, one of us going, and then a junior member council. When I say junior member, I mean someone who is not term limited going along too. So, there's different thoughts that we can put together. I just think that, as the mayor said, the timing is pretty close. I want to say, if I'm correct, we're talking about mid-October or so. So, by the time you get passports and visas and all those things lined up, and visit to the dock or whatever else you need, for shots or whatever might be needed, I'm not exactly sure. The mayor's probably knows more about that than I. These are things that need to be discussed and handled. So, if we need to do a presentation or whatever it is that the council is asking for, we should probably get that going pretty quickly. Thanks.
Right now, without even going over with the budget retreat and everything, and economic times as bad as they are, right now, I do not feel that we should send anybody over to China. And that's just how I feel. I think I have difficulty explaining to the citizens why this is happening again 3 years in a row. And if we want to meet with them at NLC, I think that would be advantageous. But right now, I would say no.
My last word on this is, Mr. Flannery, if you want to set up something with Ms. Snyder to work up some kind of timetable in the budget, that's fine. And this is something I brought up at Metro Mayor's for a different reason, but for the same thing. You have two choices when you have a business. Some of you don't have that background. I know you do. If you have a choice, you can beat your business down to the amount of money that you have, or you can build your business to make up for the stuff that you wish you had. If we wanted to beat our business down to the place we want, we would have never gone after companies. It wouldn't have made any sense in the world. We went after it to build up our budget. If we don't do it here, it doesn't make any difference. To me, it was a wonderful experience. I've taken it, I've given enough of it out that people in Colorado have made some money on my contacts. I'm just as willing right now to walk away because the personality just doesn't work for me anymore. But if Mr. Flannery, you would get with Ms. Snyder and figure out what you think this council wants, give them a presentation hopefully before we can get So we have to tell them yes or no, and that would be great with me. Mr. Benson, you said that was your last statement.
Coming in response to what you just said. This is not a personality matter. I've said several times that I believe we've accomplished things over in China by introducing this city to Nanning and other provinces or cities. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Personalities have nothing to do with this. We're talking about a business deal. And I'm saying that our chief executive officer ought to be the man going over there and being introduced to people so that he can make a business deal. This has nothing to do. Every time something happens that you don't like happening, you accuse somebody of playing personality.
Let's not go
That's
there.
not what's going on
Let's
here.
not go there.
That's not what's going on here.
But just so you realize, the three people that have some interaction with Nanning are Ms. Snyder, Ms. Nealon, and myself. And on the trip that we went to China, Ms. Nealon made all the connections with the people who can do the business. My connections were strictly mayor to mayor that allow that mayor to say, go talk to this person, and they make the deal. That's the part that doesn't seem to be getting across.
Well, what happens when you're terminated?
Ms. Nealon is the one who made all the connections on the business side.
But who's
Not
going to be
ready?
who's going to be the person?
The next mayor.
Title.
The next mayor, whoever that is.
And has that been explained to them?
That
there will be.
This is the second mayor I've had to deal with in Nanning. They move mayors around quicker than we do. If they do a really good job, they send them to another city that needs them. It's no different there than it is here.
Well,
they just don't have term limits, but that's part of
say
it.
that
And he can make less decisions. The mayor in China can make less decisions than I can because the party has to approve everything. Yes. Is that it? Good?
I think so.
Good. Reports. Mr. Gale.
Nothing further.
Mr. Flannery.
Very quickly, Mile High Music Fest this weekend.
Yes.
You probably didn't notice the little city popping up over across the street, but in case you did,
statue.
Yeah, and the stage is being put up. I mean, it's amazing. We're hopeful that there's a great turnout this year. Keep kicking it back a month, so keep your fingers crossed. And then the second PAC meeting for the I-70 realignment is this Thursday from 2 to 6 at the Swansea Rec Center. And then remember, just a reminder, early meeting next week, 5:30, and early meeting 2 weeks, 5:30.
And can someone get hold of Mr. Van Venner? Jerry Van Venner. Yes, thank you very much. He just wanted to figure out where he belonged, so it wasn't any big deal. Mr. Bullock.
Just wanted to say that on Friday, I was one of the speakers at the Live Well seminar and answered questions during the lunch hour over at Castaneda, Casillas. On Saturday, I was a speaker at one of the career fairs, explaining to people that networking is the most important thing that you can do. Your circle of friends is your lifeline. And last night we had a block party over in Shirley Curlis's block, and she was the host, and it was at her home, and it was very well attended. There had to be, I would say, about 40 people there. And so these block parties are beginning to take off because it's creating a lot of neighbor-to-neighbor interaction. Last Tuesday night, it was a night out. Yeah, National Night Out, and I was over at Quonset Huts, and I got a really great education on the Quonset Hut, and it's a very tight community over there. You've got to go over there sometime and introduce yourself to them, and that's a community that looks out for each other. Thank you.
We had Dr. Cox, MBIC, Metro Ridge Issues Committee this week, and I won't repeat much of what we heard from Simon tonight. It's really what's under discussion on a monthly basis in front of MBIC. specifically talking about amendments to some of the quantification, I shouldn't say quantification, some of the goals that are being looked at to insert the rewrite of the Metro Vision Plan, and that will ultimately go before the board, which relate to how we more carefully integrate various modes of transit into transportation planning within the sustainability plan of the Metro Vision. So, that's it.
Mr. Jones. No report. Ms. Teeter.
No report.
Mr. Benson.
Yes, I also went to a couple of those neighborhood national nights out last Thursday. Went to one down at 5261 Monaco. Also went to one up in Reunion, and you know that the chief at the one on Monaco showed me a list of all of these that were taking place in the city. I'd never seen that before. I wish I had, because there were at least two in my neighborhood. I went to one of them, but could we possibly next year, all of us, get the list of all those things that are going on in the national night out? I don't recall. Does anybody on the council recall getting that list?
Last year we had what, 3? This year we had 15.
Maybe you can speak to this, but this was a new format this year, right? Where it was really the neighborhoods were in charge of sort of self-developing or self-organizing, I think, as opposed to the past where we've PD and
So I'll just take 15 seconds, and yeah, that's the purpose of National Night Out, is to get all the neighborhoods involved in it, not get the police department to run the block parties, but get the neighborhoods involved, get the neighbors out, get them to develop the relationships. So the crime prevention officer, Kim Fenner, did a great job, and just so you know, we've got another new crime prevention officer will be coming on in a month, Tom Pope. And so I'll give us 2, and they'll be working citywide, both with all the residential neighborhoods and the commercial and business areas also, which that's where we want to put our next focus. So anyway, yeah, we'll make sure everybody gets that list next year.
Well, thanks for giving me that list, Chief, because I wouldn't have known about 2 or 3 right in my immediate neighborhood. I had not gotten it. So I hope that we can, in the future, we can get that list distributed to all of us, so we can choose the ones we want to go to. I was also at the barbecue over at Shirley Curtis's house on Sunday, and as Mr. Willis said, it was very well attended. You know, I want to correct something that I said I think it was last week, we had a discussion about the 6061 and 101. I had read in the Denver Post 6 months ago about the time that petitions were being submitted, that there were over 100 being submitted. Apparently, only 6 are going to make it to the ballot, the statewide ballot. We may have some other issues involving our school district or county or whatever. So instead of it being 100, it's only 6. I didn't know that only 6 had actually made it to the ballot. But I read in the Denver Post several months back that there were 100 that were submitted, but you can submit them all and think that you've got the right number of signatures, but you don't, and so you don't get on the ballot. So I think that's what happened with those. But I just wanted to correct that misconception that I had. And thank you.
Ms. Carson.
I really don't have a report. I just want to thank staff for getting on top of the Bell Creek issue with the pruning so quite quickly. The response in the neighborhood has been great, and they're very happy and pleased with how quickly you responded to that. And the postcard I've been told them. I only had one resident tell me they didn't receive a postcard, but they are quite happy with what the work that you did. So thank you.
Yes, just one quick thing, and that is hope to have everyone attend the Mile High Music Festival. I think everybody knows I'm a pretty big fan of that situation out there, and I hope that this year it'll be bigger and better than ever. And I would also like to thank Chuck Morris, who's the president of AEG, and Paul Andrews, who's the executive vice president of Cronkey Sports, because they have dedicated and confirmed their commitment to giving $20,000 of the festival proceeds to Commerce City local charities. And the funding will be available after the 15th of September. So I think that's pretty impressive of them. They've already made the commitment regardless of how things turn out as far as attendance, which if last year is any indication of this year, we're going to have a lot of people in this town this weekend, so which is good for everybody, from the restaurants on down the list. So I just really want to thank everyone for the work that they do to help the festival go smoothly ahead of time. Chief, I know that you have to work with multiple agencies to keep things going smoothly and safely for the citizens and the participants, and I just want to thank everyone. And I'm very excited that this event is staying here. I know that there's been some neighboring towns that would have loved to have taken it from us, so I'm more than pleased to see it stay, and the contributions to the charities I just think are really great. So I want to say thank you to everyone involved.
Before I do anything else, I want to thank Mayor Pro Tem Snyder for handling another week for me. It allowed me to go back to Kansas, see my granddaughter. She became the grand champion for sheep and the robin for the county, and if she were older, she could go to state, but she's not old enough yet. But I want to thank you for standing in. It's really nice to know there's somebody who can depend on. A few of the things that I did since then, Rose Hill had their 40th anniversary on the 31st. They actually have a tenant there. It's been there like 37 years. But what a great program going on in our city. It helps a lot of people. The other thing, I gave a class on 6061 in Colorado at Commerce City BPA, which was well received. It's telling us, though, that we've got some work to do, or this is going to go through real quick. Sunday, I was just over here at the stadium to Step Up for Cancer. This is their second event, and it was bigger than last year, which was really nice. No one went down the stairs as people are always. There'll be no further business coming before this board. Meeting's adjourned. Drive safe going home.
You need me?
I'll call you. Yeah, you can.
I wasn't here last